No, because it's going to take a minute anyways for people to.
Perfect.
But we can keep looking. I don't know why my screen is everything's yellow today.
I'm blue, da ba dee da ba da.
I know, I'm yellow. All right, we're getting a few people pop on.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Why don't we just wait a few minutes? I can pop some stuff up on the screen. We could talk about our giveaway.
I'm down. Heck yes.
Oh yeah, Hunter can talk about what we're giving away today. MCAT live online course.
Yeah, we're giving away a whole course. Yeah, it's part of a raffle for it. So yeah, it's like a 4-course pack. Like a bunch of people could win. So there's a bunch of really cool stuff going on. So hey, enter the raffle. You could win. It's with like thousands, or at least like $1,500. It's many dollars that you could instead spend elsewhere. So go for it.
Many dollars. And let me show you. Basically, all you have to do, let me pop this up, is go check out our Instagram or Twitter profiles and you'll see the details there. But basically, all you have to do is take a screenshot of watching our live streams today and tag @MapDapp and tag @Blueprint MCAT. And we're just going to select some winners later and announce it in our wrap up.
You have to let me know when you're about to take the screenshot though. That way I'm not like doing a dumb face or blink. Like, I need to be like properly primed and posed, like, hey, all right, screenshot time.
I know. Or go hang behind your like background.
I know, right? So fancy. So fancy. It was like $10 off of Amazon. Super easy.
Okay, well, why don't we just kick off? Let's do it. Okay.
I'm super down.
Yeah, I'm just going to introduce you. Okay, so big shout out, hold on a second, to our awesome sponsor of National Pre-Med Day, Blueprint MCAT. Hunter Enright is here. He's an MCAT extraordinaire and is a Blueprint course instructor and tutor. Having taken the MCAT himself, I'll let him talk about that. He's here today to give you a rundown of how to prep for the MCAT and discuss how Blueprint is here to help you prepare. So thanks for being here today. I'm going to pop off, but I will be around and I'll be helping with Q&A. So talk to you soon.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Leanne. Thanks so much for having me, Ryan Gray. National Pre-Med Day. Woo, 528. That's what we're getting. We're all going to get some 528s, right? So I'm super excited about it. And let me make sure, am I sharing my screen? How do I drag that up? La-di-da-di-da. There. Oh my goodness. Ask and I shall receive. So, hey everyone, how's it going? My name's Hunter, and like Leanne said, today we're talking all about how to prep for the MCAT. It is a huge, daunting hurdle for many, many pre-meds. In fact, for the vast majority of us, until we actually get to med school, and then you have to do step 1, step 2 at USMLEs. The MCAT, it's like the biggest stressor, and it's the reason for a lot of gray hairs. It's why I have so many gray hairs personally. Like Leanne said, I've taken the MCAT, and I've taken the MCAT many, many, many times. Lots of full lengths, but we'll talk about all of that. But really, the reason why it's so important to talk about how to prep for the MCAT is because it's so huge. Like, how do you prep for something that is this big? A lot of times it's very daunting. It's very overwhelming. And unfortunately, as human beings, when things overwhelm us, we tend to just ignore it until a month or so before our exam. And then I go, oh yeah, I guess I can wing it. Usually not the best strategy. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. We've got a whole agenda going on, a little bit of intro, some MCAT overview. We're going to plan your MCAT journey, how to like prepare to take it. Like, it's the pre-planning phases. So prepare for it. I'm going to walk you through the basics of building a study schedule that'll kind of help you out, and it'll walk you through there. And then, yeah, like Leanne said, we'll talk about a little bit how Blueprint can help. I promise I am the most upfront person about how big of a Blueprint shill I am. I'm a Blueprint instructor. I'm a Blueprint tutor. Like, Blueprint's pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie. That being said, I promise not to be super gross and like salesy and used car salesman-y. We have a whole bunch of free stuff, and not like raffles. Like, you can just go and download some free things, and I'm gonna show you all about that later. So without any further ado, let's do a real quick intro, because who the heck am I, right? So like I said, my name's Hunter. Hey, what's up? I'm an instructor. I'm a tutor. That's cool. I've actually been doing this for like about 8 years or so. So like in this picture, I had much less gray hair than I do now. And right after school, I went to Arizona State University. Woo, go Sun Devils, for biochem. And I was like, all right, I'm doing it pre-med. We're hitting the gate, like we're coming out the gate strong, hitting the pavement running. And then I realized that I wanted to take a gap year, and I started teaching at a nonprofit called the Arizona Science Center. And I was teaching science to kids, and it was really, really fun. Long story short, I got to be Arizona's Bill Nye the Science guy. Like I would just take science experiments to schools all across Arizona, and they would be like, all right, like all the third graders, let's go to the assembly hall, and the science guy is going to do some cool stuff. And I would like blow things up and like do dissections with kids. It was super rad. Most fun job I've ever had. Don't tell Blueprint that. Sorry, my boss who's watching. But yeah, easily, hands down, most fun job I've ever had. And that gap year turned into a gap 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then I was like, you know what? Let's get back into it. Started prepping for the MCAT again as a non-traditional. So I've got a little bit of non-trad experience behind me. Took the MCAT, did phenomenally well, got a 521, hooray, go me. And then realized that I just like teaching. So I didn't want to go to med school anymore. I just wanted to keep teaching. But like I took the MCAT, so might as well teach MCAT, right? So sorry, third graders across Arizona, no more photosynthesis and mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. Instead, we're talking oxyhemoglobin dissociation curves and stuff like that. And then last but not least, a little bit like side fun things. It's really just an excuse for me to show off pictures of my dogs. I'm bossed around by 2 lovely little canines. We have Leia, Princess Leia, on the left, and Winston, the corgi on the right. So these are my dogs. They're amazing. I love them. They're locked out. So if you hear barking, sorry, someone knocked out the door. And long story short, I don't know, I just like really dorky things. So enough about me. Let's dive into it. The MCAT, it is a mile wide, right? It's basically an exam that tests you not only on 4 years of undergraduate science, but critical thinking and application of all 4 of those years. So it is a mile wide, but I always tell my students that it's only an inch deep. So it is very manageable. Now I'm going to start this off just by assuming that if you're here and you are like, hey, I need to just like have a conversation and ask some questions. We're going to do Q&A at the very end of this. I need to ask some questions about like, how do I study for this? I'm going to assume that you are in the beginning phases of your MCAT prep. So let's go over just some like MCAT basics, right? So the exam itself, hey, you got to take it to get to medical school. That's what MCAT stands for. It's an acronym. It's multiple choice, computer-based, standardized exam. And a lot of people hate standardized exams. I mean, let's get real. No one has fun taking tests. Unless you're a Blueprint instructor who essentially has Stockholm syndrome, in which case, like, yeah, like the MCAT's kind of fun, y'all. Like, don't get me wrong. It can be. My classes are fun. The AMC are the people who write it. They are the ones who administer it. There are 4 sections on it. We have 3 science sections and a cars section. And it is a 6.25, 6 and a quarter hour exam, but that is just literally how much time you are going to be testing. If you include all of your optional breaks, they have a tutorial in the beginning. There's a lunch in the middle of it because it's essentially like a whole shift at work. You get a lunch break. It's more or less you're testing for 8 hours. And they don't give you a calculator. I always take this for granted and assume that this is just like known. But yeah, they don't give you a calculator. There's always a couple students who are like, wait, what? How are we supposed to do logs without a calculator? There are ways. Let me tell you what, there are ways. We teach you. You will have a periodic table. And this is more or less what the entire test looks like, right? So the first section, we've got, there's like an examinee agreement and optional tutorial. Cool. Really just use that extra time. It's like 10-ish minutes. To put yourself into a Zen-like state and go like, all right, I'm about to take the MCAT. Let's lower my heart rate and chill out a little bit. Then you dive into it. You have your chem phys. You have a 10-minute break. It's not optional. Please just take all your breaks. The MCAT takes so much from us already. It takes so much from us. Don't let them take those extra 10-minute breaks that they give you, okay? Take those 10 minutes back. Then you have your CARs, or your critical analysis and reasoning skills. That's the reading section that everybody loves so much. Then you've got your lunch, and then we do biochem, and then we do psych-soc. So this is what the day looks like. You're in for a good time. Trust me, it'll be a ton of fun. Like I mentioned before, it is a critical thinking test. And what I mean by that is, yes, you do have to have all of your formulas memorized. Yes, you need to know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's tons of content that you need to have memorized for it, but it's not like your undergraduate exams where it's like, hey, do you know this? What is the powerhouse of the cell? Hey, mitochondria. Cool, you got your point. They don't reward you for knowing your content. I always tell my students that the MCAT expects you to know your content, right? Very rarely will it just be a, hey, do you know this fact? Usually they're going to go, and by they, I mean like the MCAT. I'm anthropomorphizing it. It is now a living, breathing entity. the MCAT will go like, hey, I expect you to know what the citric acid cycle is. I expect you to know this thing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it. I'm going to say that there's a mutation and the third enzyme no longer functions. What are the downstream effects? So that's what I mean by it's a critical thinking test. They expect you to know your content. They're going to give you some new information, usually in the passages or in the question stems, and then you have to reason your way to the answer. So it's a really challenging test for that reason, because a lot of the times, especially in our undergraduate, we haven't had to do that. It's been mostly memorize, regurgitate, and then the day after the exam, info dump, right? We instantly forget everything. Side note, if you know you're going to be taking the MCAT, don't info dump all of your science classes, because you'll need to know all that stuff again for the MCAT, and it's just way easier if you kind of just remember it. But yeah, more or less, here are all the different science topics that they're going to be quizzing you on: Gen Chem, Orgo, Biochem, Physics, Psych, and Soc. That's all of it. There's more nuances throughout there. And in fact, the AMC, if you go to their website, they have something called the content outline. It is, my bullet point here says, it is a great resource. I'm going to change it to say, it's a resource. It is, without a doubt, the most comprehensive list of here's everything that will be tested on the MCAT. They don't actually give you the formulas or teach you the stuff. They just say kinematics, right? They're not going to give you the equations. You have to figure that out on your own. But it is exhaustive. It is comprehensive. That resource, the AMC content outline, it's like 100, 150 pages. It's huge. So again, in the vein of like, hey, the MCAT can be pretty overwhelming and daunting, usually that content outline doesn't help mitigate those feelings. It just kind of exacerbates them. But it is a resource. If you want to know exactly everything that's on the exam, go check that out. Highly recommend it. And content knowledge, like I said, you need to know all your science. It's expected in all the different science subjects or sections on the exam, but not cars. Cars is the one, and I'm sure you've all heard this, but we still make the mistake a million times. Don't bring any outside information to cars. Everything you need for cars is going to be right there in the passage in front of you. Now, this is roughly on the right side. My camera's mirrored. On this side of your screen, this is roughly a general breakdown of the percentages that you can expect to see certain topics pop up in the sections of the exam. And I always ask my students, hey, what subjects are you the most freaked out about? And physics and orgo are always number 1 and 2. Usually there's a couple other ones sprinkled in there, but physics and organic chemistry are like nightmare fuel for my pre-med students. Luckily, they're also some of the most infrequently tested subjects on the exam. Now, please do not go home, or if you're already home, because like, yay, Zoom life. If you don't leave this and go like, well, Hunter said that orgo is never going to get tested, and so I don't need to study it. That's not true. I did not say that. I just said it's going to be tested a little less frequently than something like general biology or general chemistry, right? You still need to know it. But the crux of my argument here is don't spend the last month leading up to test day just reading a physics textbook cover to cover because it stresses you out. That is not an efficient use of your time. There are much better ways to spend your time prepping, and there are much more efficient ways to build a study plan. So that's what we're kind of talking about today. As y'all know, the MCAT, it's scored. Heck yes, you take a test, you're going to get some numbers afterwards, right? So essentially it's saying there's 3 different scores that you could look at. There's the raw score, which is literally, I got, 50 questions right. Cool. There's a scaled score, which it is scaled. It's not curved. The AMC is very particular about this. They don't curve it. They scale it. And so they plug your raw score in. They compare it to everyone else's raw scores. And then you get a number, right? It's either 472 to 528. We're all aiming for 528s because 528 day. Heck yes. Boom. Today's May 28th. See? Fun. But that's a perfect score, essentially. And the way they do that is they just add up a 118 to 132 for the 4 different sections. Boom, here's your scaled score. Then once you get a scaled score, you can turn that into a percentage or a percentile. You've probably heard a million times. You've probably said a million times, I want to be in like those upper percentiles. I want to be in the 90th percentile or the 99th percentile, etc. That basically means if you are in the 90th percentile, you did better than 90% of other students. So that's what that means in case you didn't know. And also, once you get into those higher percentiles, it's less of a difference to jump several percentile points, right? Because it's essentially It's not scaled, but the curve, it looks like a bell curve. And when you're in the middle, you're sitting at that like 500, 501 mark. That's where a lot more students are. So even if you get a couple questions right, you're going to go up just a little bit. But when you get to the wings here, either doing really good or really bad. There's not very many people there. So if you just get a couple extra questions right, you can jump huge amounts of percentiles. So keep that in mind. You don't need to get a perfect score. You just need to do better than everyone else. So what's considered a good MCAT score? I get that literally I get that question every single class. It depends. It depends on what school you're trying to apply to. It depends what the rest of your application looks like, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, it depends is kind of a cop-out answer. No one's ever happy with it. So here are some actual numbers, right? The 50th percentile, it's slowly going up. It used to be 500. Now it's like 501.5. There are no decimal points on the actual scoring, but somehow the AMC has calculated that 501.5 is the average for the 50th percentile. 80th percentile is 510, 99th is 522 to 523, right? The mean MCAT score for matriculants, and matriculants means people who got accepted into a school, that was 511.5. So 511 is the average or the mean of people who get in. Keep that in mind. That being said, you can do your own research. Look into every school that you're interested in applying to. They all will tell you the stats for them, for their like matriculants and their applicants. And you can figure out like, not every school is a 511, right? Some people get into certain schools with like a 501. Some people get into schools with like a 502. So just do some research. Long story short, it's not that hard. Just do some Googling. You got this. So no, that's all the way. Cool. We all know about the MCAT, whatever. Let's talk about how to plan our journey really fast. Couple of things that I always tell my students to pay attention to. When are you planning on taking it? Because that is going to determine so much of what your life looks like for about a year. Okay. When are you going to be taking it? Are you taking a gap year? How many prerequisites have you taken? How many prerequisites do you still need to take if you're still an undergraduate? If you're not an undergraduate and you've graduated, do you need to go back and do some extra content review, et cetera, et cetera? Are you going to be studying for the MCAT while you're still in school? Are you going to do it over summer? Which hey, it's May 28th. There's a whole bunch of students who just started summer and they're looking forward to, they are planning on studying for their MCAT over the summer break, and they're going to take it pretty soon. If you are planning on taking it during the semester, are you going to plan your semester to accommodate that? A lot of students will kind of take easier, quote unquote, classes so that they can kind of focus more on their MCAT prep. Because let me tell you what, prepping for the MCAT, it's almost like having a full-time job. So it's a lot. And then, how many months do you have? When do you plan on taking the test? When are you planning on applying? All these things are going to play a factor. So let's talk about how to actually prep for taking the MCAT itself. There are prerequisites. There's always one class. Always, and when I say class, I mean an MCAT prep class. There's always one class where I have a student that goes hey, I didn't take Gen Chem, or I haven't taken Orgo, or I haven't taken Biochem. Is it cool if I'm still here? It makes it exponentially more difficult to prep for the MCAT if you are seeing the material for the very first time. That being said, it's not impossible. A lot of students are currently in their biochem class as they're in my class studying for the MCAT. And a lot of the times it's kind of nice because their undergraduate class coincides with what we're covering in our MCAT class. So as they're learning in class, we're also talking about in our MCAT prep, kind of works out. That being said, if you are hey, I need to take my MCAT in 3 months and I have never taken a single biochem class, or I've never taken an organic chemistry class, it's not impossible, but it's much more challenging. So just keep that in mind, okay? So highly recommended that you take a lot of the prerequisites for your major, just baseline science classes, Gen Chem, Biochem, Orgo, things like that, physics, etc. Take that physics lab, shoot those lasers, do those mirrors, all that good stuff. Things that aren't required but might help you out. Any upper level biology class, anatomy, physiology, neurology, immunology, endocrinology, you can read that list here, right? All of these are going to help you out, but it isn't a prerequisite for the MCAT. So take those as you will. And like I said, if you're missing if there's a huge gap in your content, if it's just a semester, cool, you might be able to either self-prep or you can take that class during that semester. But if you're missing a whole year's worth of content, 2 semesters of a class that, it's Orgo 1, Orgo 2, or anything along those lines, it might be kind of challenging. Physics 1, Physics 2. That's probably a better example. Orgo 2, usually not. Not too much inorganic chemistry. But with that being said, here are the things that you should think about. We're just going to burn through these real fast. Like, man, I wish I had a little bit more time with y'all, but 528 day, there's so much going on. What should your study plan include, right? Content review, obviously. And this is the fatal mistake that a lot of my students make is they spend not an inordinate amount, but they spend the majority of their time doing purely content review. So what do I mean by that? Just reading textbooks cover to cover, just watching nothing but content review videos and like taking pages and pages of notes, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, you need to do that, but don't spend like 90% of your time on content review. There are much better ways to prep for the exam. And in fact, there are required ways to study for the exam that are going to help you out a lot more than just reading textbooks, right? Spoiler, the best way to prep for the MCAT is by taking a whole bunch of MCATs. So applied practice, full-length exams that are practiced and not scored, like Q banks, doing passage-based problems is going to be the best way for you to prep for the MCAT. But it's really hard to do those passages if you don't have the content knowledge that they're building off of. So that's kind of the balance there. I usually say taking the MCAT is a third your content knowledge, 1/3 your like just practicing it, and then 1/3 like knowing what to expect on the MCAT and just being familiar with the exam itself. So there's a lot that goes into it. Like I said earlier, it's not just memorization, regurgitation. You can't just vomit out like here's formulas and you get your points. It doesn't quite work like that. Great visual, I know. So content review, strategy, and practice is definitely probably a third of it. And then you should also try to use the AAMC resources. There are dozens of different resources out there. I happen to think that Blueprint Prep is one of the better ones. And a lot of people do too. That being said, coming from the horse's mouth is probably one of the best resources you can get. In this case, the horse is the AAMC. Yes, I just called the AAMC a horse inadvertently. I'm very sorry. That being said, usually you want to get a couple of their practice tests in because it is written by the people who are writing the actual MCAT. Fun fact, if you sign up for a Blueprint course, or if you win the raffle and get a free Blueprint course, every single resource from the AAMC that they have on their own, we include with our course, so you don't have to buy them again. Hooray. And then just talking about like length, how long do people tend to study for the MCAT? The AAMC says about 260 hours for the average test taker. You can break that into like roughly 11 hours a week for about 6 months. We're not average though. Who wants to be in that 500, 501, 501.5 area? No way. We want to be in those upper percentiles. So usually I recommend to my students 300, 350-ish hours, split up minimum over like 4-ish months. So take that as you will, plan your life accordingly. And a couple things just to note while you're doing your content review, while you're studying for it, etc. Spaced repetition is fantastic. If you aren't familiar with it, just do a quick Google search, brief elevator pitch of spaced repetition. You cover the things that you're not familiar with more frequently than the things that you're very familiar with. There it is. You spread it out over a week. Anki has a great example of it. I am a huge fan of, because I have gray hair and I'm old, I'm a huge fan of physical flashcards. Hey, and you can do spaced repetition with your physical flashcards as well. Just make piles of them, etc. Like I have no idea what these are. I kind of know what these are. I definitely know what these are, and cover them in a frequency that makes sense. Taking full lengths is super important. Schedule that into your study plan. Usually, the most successful students are going to be taking anywhere between like 7, 8, 9 full-length exams. I think I took 10, not including my diagnostic, around there. So yeah, take a lot of full lengths. Just as like a sneak preview into my life, I told you I was a non-traditional student, right? So I'd been out of school for several years when I started prepping for my MCAT. And I was working full time, Monday through Friday at a 9 to 5. Hey. So what towards the end of my studying, right? In the beginning, it was a lot of content review. And then I kind of started to switch and do applied practice and taking more and more exams. Saturdays were my full length day. So I took a full length exam on Saturday, 8 hours or so, went through the whole thing, test-like conditions. And then I didn't think about the MCAT for the rest of the day because that's a lot of MCAT. Then the next day on Sunday, I would review that exam. Usually it would take me about like just as long, if not longer, to review it than it took me to take it. So like 8 to 10 hours ish. That would be all day Sunday. And then based on the results of my full length that I just took, that would dictate the content that I wanted to study Monday through Friday in the evening when I got home from work. So that's kind of what like my last month and a half of prep looked like. So try to build a plan that emulates something along those lines. Not exactly, but whatever works for your life. But please, in all of that, make sure you're prepping cars, usually 1 to 2 cars passages a day. Definitely going to help you out. This is what a great study plan kind of looks like. And if this looks kind of familiar to you, it might be because you checked out Blueprint's free resources. I'll talk about the free stuff in a little bit. But this is what the Blueprint study planning tool looks like. Long story short, you plug in, hey, I want to take the test on this day. I'm starting to study on this day. I can dedicate this many hours per week. Go. And it will generate an entire like study plan for you. It tells you exactly what to study, when to study it, how long to study it. And it even gives you like, if this is part of your course, it gives you the like chapters, the modules, the videos, and the quizzes right here, and you can just do it. You can also drag and drop. So if you go, oh no, something came up on Thursday, I can't do microbiology and biotech, I'm going to move those to Friday. You can just drag and drop. So our study planner is super dope. I highly recommend checking it out. And you can get a free one. Yay. So we'll get back to that. Long story short, critical thinking. It is a critical thinking exam. Please don't just try to memorize everything and go into it. Application and applied practice is going to be the #1 thing that you need to work on. It's one of the hardest things for students to kind of get in the habit of. I call it like seeing the matrix or like thinking like the test makers, right? But that's the great thing about standardized tests is that they are standardized. They're more or less the same every single time. The AAMC can't just pull like some radically new test out of left field. It took them decades to just do the 2015 revamp for the MCAT, right? So we can more or less predict what's going to be on the exam, how they're going to present it to us. And we can also sort of predict like what the answer choices are going to look like, what the questions are going to look like. They're just filling in different numbers and different like facts. So that's kind of why I like standardized exams. We can almost gamify it. And we start to see the matrix and we start to make predictions. So it's pretty great. But again, this page is just saying, hey, don't do 100% content review. You need to practice it too. The best way to score well on the MCAT is by taking the MCAT. And you need to do it over a long chunk of time. You can't just be a doctor in a weekend. Who knew? Who knew? So with that being said, let's do some really quick basics on how to build a timeline. If you are planning on prepping during your school year, or if you have a full-time job, more or less, this is roughly, there's asterisks all over the place here, but this is what it's going to look like, right? So 5 to 6 months before test day, you are going to be doing a lot of science review. You're going to start looking at some like MCAT style questions. At Blueprint, you can sign up for, we have an MCAT question of the day. And like, it's just a great way to just become familiar with it, be exposed to like a question every single day. It's a new question, et cetera, et cetera. And then we post like the answer. So it's great. But that's a great way for you to just kind of become exposed to it. Do that for a few months. Then about 3-4-ish months, then you're going to kind of pivot. You're going to pivot a little bit, start doing MCAT style practice questions. What do I mean by that? It is either discrete or more appropriately, passage based. So go through passages, figure out what that's like, maybe start working on like your pacing, et cetera, et cetera. And then do some spaced repetition so that you don't forget like flashcards and stuff like that, so that you don't forget the things that you studied 2 months ago, because that's going to happen. And then 1 month before test day, you're doing AAMC materials. You're going to do some AAMC practice exams, and you're just going to get ready to take the test. The last month is like the most exciting and the most anxiety-inducing month for a lot of my students. But like that last month is really, I don't know. There's an electric feeling in the air. It's electric. Anyways, if you're planning to prep over the summer, or you just kind of have an open schedule, et cetera, might look a little different. You might not have to spread it out over 6 months. You can probably do it 3-4-ish months. But more or less, same thing, right? It's just over a shorter time span because you have more hours per week to dedicate to the MCAT. Makes sense, right? So it's more or less what your timeline is going to look like. So now that we've like talked about timelines, we've talked about like, what the MCAT is, et cetera, here are all the different assets, all the different ways that you can get content, all the different materials et cetera, resources, whatever you want to call it. So there are content review books, duh. Those are great for passive studying. We call it passive studying because you're not actually like practicing. You're not taking the formula that you just read in the book and like using it to work a problem. You're just kind of taking notes, doing flashcards, et cetera. It's good for like big picture content review, but that's about it. It isn't going to get you that score you want on the MCAT just by doing content alone. Question banks are fantastic because they are like really quick. Like here's a passage and a couple questions. We have question banks, AMC has question banks, et cetera, et cetera. They're great. Full lengths are fantastic. I will always push for full length exams. Take as many as you can. Don't do more than one a week. That's a little ridiculous. And you might burn yourself out. Burnout is very real. Okay. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So, don't burn yourself out. Especially I had one student that was like, I'm going to take 3 MCAT full lengths the week of my actual test. And it's like, no, please don't do that. You will melt. So yeah, full lengths, I can't recommend it enough. Just make sure that you're reviewing the test that you just took. Don't just take it, look at your score and go, oh yay, or oh man, and then like never look at it again. You need to spend like 10 hours reviewing every single question, every single problem, every single answer, even if you got it right. Go through the whole test and make sure you understand why you're getting things right and getting things wrong. Lastly, there's video lectures, flashcards, and then if you want some extra help, which like a lot of people do, it is a monster of an exam, and sometimes it can just be really useful to have someone who's gone through the whole thing and show you the ropes, right? At this point in my MCAT career, I've taken 2 real MCATs because I'm old. I took one that was pre-2015 with the old scoring, the 32 digits. And then I took another one that had the 3 digits. So yeah, that's where my 521 came from. But yeah, I took 2 real ones and I've taken dozens of full lengths. Like, I don't even think I'm exaggerating when I say like over 30. So like, it's a lot of full lengths. So like, hey, I've seen it all. I could definitely help you out. So can any of our other Blueprint instructors. But if you do want us to hang out with you or somebody to hang out with you, personalized tutoring is great if you want like one-on-one. I do tutoring and I love tutoring. I think it's kind of like a puzzle because I just get to talk to the student and go like, hey, how come you missed this question? Like, let's really dig through and like, let me find the one solution that's going to like pivot your thought process and get you to the right answer. And I also teach our live online courses, which are a ton of fun because that like, it's a huge group environment. It's really electric. The chat's blowing up. Like it's a good time in the class. So yeah, either one of them are fantastic if you want some extra help. But more or less, like we've been talking about this whole time, here's how you're going to plan on building your study schedule, right? Review your content, look at things that are covered on the exam, identify your strengths and weaknesses, right? Dedicate more time. A lot of people like to go like, orgo is scary and I don't like it, so I'm going to avoid it. There is no avoidance defense mechanism here, right? We can't do that. We have to be exposed to all the stuff we don't want to. We don't want to see. So dive into the things that you're unfamiliar with or the things that challenge you because it's going to pay off dividends. Do practice questions, Q banks, full lengths. We've already talked about it. Again, you need some of that content. So do some content and then dive into it. But like, don't just do like 3 months worth of content. It's a lot. That being said, cars is the exception. There's no content for cars. Everything that you need to know for cars is right there in the passage in front of you. It is an open book test, essentially. I love cars. Much to the chagrin of all of my students. They groan when I tell them that I love cars because literally it's an open book test. The answers are right in front of you. You just need to be trained on how to think the way that the cars MCAT section wants you to think. So that's the tricky part. But since there is no content for cars, you can't just like study formulas. You're going to be doing cars passages for like well before you start doing science passages. When you're still doing science content review, taking notes, watching videos, doing flashcards, you're going to be doing a daily cars passage, like non-negotiable. Do daily cars. Even if you're good at cars, do daily cars. That way you don't forget, or that way it doesn't slip out from under you, right? That's one of the worst things where you go, no, I'm good at this. I'm good at this. And then you get closer to your test day, you haven't practiced it and you lose it. And then spaced repetition, it's fantastic. Talked about it a little bit. This is what spaced repetition looks like, okay? My flashcards. I showed you my big old stack. I would go through my flashcards every single night, like 30, 40 minutes before bed. And I broke them out into sections. So like, I'm going to review my physics flashcards tonight. Cool. Go through the entire pile. If you have no idea what the answer of a flashcard is, it goes into like a far left pile. I don't know what these answers are. If you kind of know what it is, you were halfway there, but like you weren't 100% sure, goes into a middle pile of like, I'm 50-50 on it. And then if you totally know what it is, it goes into a far right. Yes, I've got this flashcard memorized. And then you keep those piles, you keep those associations. And then the next time you review them, you go through your, I have no idea what the answer of this flashcard is pile. You go through that like every other day, every day, something like that, really, really frequently. And then you go through your, I kind of know this, but I'm not 100% there. Go through that a little less frequently, maybe every 3-4 days, right? And then I totally know this pile. Yes, I've got this memorized. Go through that like once a week, maybe even once every other week, right? That way you're studying the things that you don't know more frequently than the things that you do know, but you're still covering the things that you know so you don't forget them. That being said, sometimes you will forget them. Or sometimes you start to memorize the things that you don't know. Heck yes, it's working. In that case, spaced repetition allows for like flexibility. It's always moving. So if you get something right that was in your I have no idea pile, you move it to your middle pile. It gets promoted. Yay. And then if you get something in your middle pile, right, it goes to your far right pile. I've got this memorized now. The opposite is also true. If you start to forget things and you go to a flashcard and you're like, oh, actually, I don't remember this, it gets demoted a pile. So it's this constantly ebbing and flowing pile of flashcards. And that's why spaced repetition is pretty fantastic for memorizing like quick little facts. What is the powerhouse of the cell? What does alanine look like, et cetera? Your amino acids, formulas, functional group, like things like that. It's fantastic. Hey, y'all, did you know that Blueprint has free flashcards that cover all those things? Heck yes. So yeah, more or less, that's all it is. We can go past this. So let's talk. I just gave you like the little bit of like, hey, we have free stuff. Here's how Blueprint can help. We've got classes, obviously. Last year in 2020, holy cow, it's been a year. We came out with a brand new course. And I'm a Blueprint shill. Y'all know this, but like from my most objective, unbiased point of view, it's the best class out there. All of the videos there are animations. It isn't like a 3-hour lecture that's just recorded with a floating head. There's like illustrations, there's animations, like it walks through everything. And it's like quick little like 15 minutes to cover this. Here's a little quiz. Here's another 10-minute video. Here's a quiz. Here's something. So it's got something for everybody. And like literally, again, the study planner tool, it's built into the class. It incorporates the class. And like, if you just follow, like, here's an example on this mobile version of the planner. Wow. If you just go through with a study plan of like study all these things on these days and then take your test, you're going to be in really good shape. So I think the course is fantastic. Truthfully, I wish that I had like the study planner tool and this particular like Blueprint course when I was prepping for the MCAT. So there you go. I'm a little envious. We also have fantastic MCAT practice exams. We've got like 10 of them. They're the closest thing you can get without going to the AAMC. So they're fantastic. They're amazing. We all know what a practice exam is. We now have a brand new live online course, which we never had before. This is brand new as far as it just launched in January. So the first round of classes have just finished. We're doing other ones. Like, they're such a good time. I'm an instructor for these classes. And let me tell you, like, I love it. It's super fun in there. We've got 2 instructors on camera. And I think that's why, because it isn't just like a boring monotone lecture. It's literally like me and one of my fellow nerdy MCAT buds. And we just kind of like talk about like, hey, how would you do this? What is this? Like, oh yeah. Oh, do you have a mnemonic? Oh, what's it? And like, it's this really fun back and forth between the two of us and the chat and the class. And like, it's a good time in there. So check it out. I think it's really fun. Here's the important part. And it's so important that my own face is on there. Look at that. Thanks, marketing team. We have a whole bunch of free stuff. So if you want to check out what those like modules look like with the videos, you can get free videos. If you want to check out what our free or what our practice exams look like, you can get a free full length. You can even check out like the customizable study planner, all that stuff that I've been talking about. Go to this website. If you just go to blueprintprep.com, click on MCAT, and then there's a little tab that says free resources. You can get all of this for free. So like, this is why I want to talk to y'all. Take advantage of the free stuff, check it out. And if you like it, hang out with us a little bit longer, whatever, it's up to you. But check out the free stuff. Question of the day, et cetera, blog posts, so on and so forth. Now, this is the one thing that is brand new and actually just got introduced like a week or so ago. We have a flashcard pack, and it goes over all of the best things that flashcards are used for. Your amino acids, your formulas, your functional groups, et cetera, and they're free. So go check it out. It's on the same place. You can also go to mcatflashcards.com. You can get them. they're fantastic and they're free. And like, I honestly, the best thing for me is when my students just shoot me an email and they're like, hey, I got this score. It was super awesome. Thank you so much. I love helping students out because the MCAT can be super stressful and it can be like the worst experience in the world if you let it be. I am very much of the opinion that it doesn't have to be. I like the MCAT. I like studying science. I think it's cool. It changes the way that I thought about the world. And I want to share that with students too. So that's why I'm really big on like the free stuff. That's why I want you all to check out the flashcards, check out like the free student resources, this stuff with that handsome devil. Because like, honestly, it's just going to help you all out. So even if you don't take my class, even if you're not my tutoring student, I want you to do well. This is going to help you do well. So yeah, check it out. I'm done. I'm done being a shill. Now it's Q&A. You guys have any questions? Hit me up. Let me know. I think our national pre-med people are going to be feeding me questions, but I live for it. It doesn't even have to be about how to prep for the MCAT. It can be any question. You can ask me about kinematics. Oh, Mia, look at this. It's popping up on the screen. How cool. Do pre-meds with documented learning disabilities get accommodations? Yes, you have to reach out to the AAMC. They do accommodations. I don't know the specifics of what you have to provide to them, but yes, either call them, email them, go to the AAMC's website. There are accommodations. So yes, check that out and take advantage of it. Heck yes, like 100%. Totally. Good question. Why did I become an MCAT instructor as opposed to a physician? That is a good question as well. I think it is twofold. One, when I was teaching at the Arizona Science Center, it was way too much fun. And I don't know if y'all can tell from this presentation, but like, I like talking to people. I like being really extroverted and overt and so on and so forth. But I also happen to like science at the same time. So teaching MCAT science and like teaching MCAT prep, it's this super hyper niche area that I've been able to like wiggle my way into and like make a living off of that. And like, I get to do both of the things that I love doing. I get to talk to people. I get to nerd out and be dorky with like a bunch of students all the time. But I also get to talk about like real intense science and not just, hey, third graders, let's talk about photosynthesis. Like that wasn't filling my bucket. So like, this is really the best of both worlds. And I didn't want, here's the other one. I didn't want to go $250,000 in debt. And I didn't want to finish school in my 30s. So I wanted to get out there and have fun and live life and meet all of y'all. Actually, like the reason why I love this so much and why I keep doing it for this long is because the students are dope. So good question. Long story short, I was broke and I like hanging out with you guys.
Hi. All right.
Hi,
awesome. Yay! Okay, you know what? We are exactly on time, and that was awesome. Guys, Hunter, he's amazing, and we love him. And I love that somebody put in the comment, they said National Pre-Med Day is free largely because of Blueprint MCAT. So thank you. And thank you. Thank you to them.
Hey, you guys are awesome. Thank you so
Hunter,
much for having us.
How could people reach out or if they have any questions?
Oh, yeah, you can go to Blueprint. You can reach out to us. MCAT@blueprintprep.com. We've got, I mean, even if you just go to our, honestly, the quickest way, real talk, go to blueprintprep.com/MCAT, and there's a little chat function. And we have like a team of people that are right there to answer your questions in real time. So if you have a question, that's the fastest way. Otherwise, email us, check out some of our free resources, etc., etc.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys. For anybody who's sticking around in the blue room, we have Matt Music, who's a Hunter. I'll pop you out if you. Hi, Matt Music, who is a surgical PA. He's going to come on and talk about a day in the life of a surgical PA. So we'll be back in a minute.
guys. So it's Rachel here, co-founder of MAPT. Our current guest, Matt Music, physician assistant, is having some technical issues, so we're still hoping that he can make it. So hopefully you can bear with us for a minute or two while we sort that out. And in the meantime, I'm here. I'm happy to do Q&A. Or take your feedback. I know that this is our pre-PA track, so I really hope it happens because we definitely want to make sure that our physician get some love and attention today, separate from pre-med stuff. Obviously, some of the stuff we've talked about today applies to the entire pre-health track. I've been helping pre-health students for a long time, so not just pre-med, but when I worked at the Princeton Review, I was doing pre-law, pre-grad, pre-dent, pre-opt, some physician assistant, although I was at the Princeton Review a long time ago and that wasn't as common back then. And Dr. Scott Wright is here with me. I'm going to add him so that he gets to have as much face space as I do. And Dr. Scott Wright, you also have a history of helping pre-health students outside of pre-med, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
Oh, now there I am. Can you hear me?
Nope, still not.
Oh.
Okay, this session is having a little bit of a curse. That was me 3 hours ago. Those of you who were with me in my, I was trying to do a mapped demo and talk about you tracking things, and I was having all kinds of woes. Hopefully it's not me. I did only come over when I heard they needed help. I don't think I cursed this session. Oh, you guys
How about
can hear
now?
him.
Can you hear me now?
Well, that's interesting.
Can you hear me now? We can hear him.
Apparently it was me. They could hear him just fine. I swear to God, guys, I don't think I'm the curse of this because it was having issues when I came over to help. Okay, cool. So wherever you were, Scott.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I did do a lot of pre-health advising for a number of years. Certainly did advise pre-PA students quite a bit. And very adept at that. So certainly can answer questions and address concerns. So we're certainly hopeful that that Matt will be able to join us here in a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So comments or questions from the audience, let us know. Okay, we've got Ian. Nice. Ian says, do you think it is a good or bad idea to apply for both med school and PA programs, or focus on one?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ian. And my opinion would be you need to focus on one. Many PA programs are in the context of health science centers where medical schools exist. And if they find out, that you're applying to both, which could happen, then it may well be that both will not like that. And I think you need to make a decision. Do you want to go to med school? Do you want to be a physician, or do you want to be a PA? And really focus on one or the other. To take some soul searching on the front end to really see what you think is going to be best for you and for what your goals are in life and in your professional life and in your personal life, and then make a decision which one really fits those needs and goals that you have.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, and I guess what I would say, Ian, too, is, aside from the optics, it's a lot of money to apply to both. And I mean, I'm making zero assumptions about you, but, people have different resource limitations, right? So even if that isn't a hindrance for you, I just don't think it's the most efficient way to proceed. The prerequisites for those two programs are similar, but not the same. PA actually, I think, does a better job of explaining to pre-professional students how important clinical is. I mean, I'm having to tell pre-meds over and over, if you have to choose between research and clinical, I want you to go get your clinical. And a lot of pre-meds are still like hanging out under this weird concept that research matters a lot more than it actually does. And then people always cite, oh, but all these people have research. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't mean they had to have it. It just means they also were confused. Where I think pre-PA students are well educated in the intense requirements of clinical experience before applying. So some of it is, there's a difference there. The other is, I love that you're thinking this question. So even though Scott and I are saying no, I think it's really important to consider the two different career paths, and they both have merit. And where I would advise you to do your comparison is not in the application moment, but in the shadowing experience. If you're not sure, go shadow some doctors, go shadow some PAs. Maybe you'll get really lucky and get experience at a practice that has a PA and a doctor, so you can see how they work together and who does what. That's where I would go with that question. But thank you for asking it. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I was going to mention, and we're still hopeful that that Matt will be able to join us. But one of the things I wanted to mention is one of the reasons that we were very excited about Matt being on is that he is a PA and has been for a number of years, but he is a surgical PA in neurosurgery. So he is the extension of the physician in both the surgical suite and then also at the bedside of patients in both pre-op as well as post-op. And so this is to emphasize that as a PA, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a primary care PA. You can specialize in a variety of different specialties, just as physicians do. No additional training is necessarily required, although you may go through some training at your clinic or hospital. But you can specialize, and there are PAs in every specialty that you can imagine, and they do the work with the physician, and that's been very, I think, eye-opening for a lot of students.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I also think, I mean, again, he's not here, but he's here in spirit. He wants to be here, I think. The other thing that was really intriguing to me when we were talking with him about joining is that before he was a PA, he was an RN, I believe, for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So, a lot of you, there's a lot of overlap in healthcare careers. So a lot of the pre-meds I work with have associates in nursing or bachelors in nursing. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, I've had people say like, well, is that going to be a strike against me because I was a nurse? And like, no way, like 100% not. The more clinical experience you have, the more impressed people are going to be. Now, I know actually, I only caught snippets of it, but I think when Caleb and Dr. Wright, Caleb Marsh and Scott Wright were talking in the last session, they were talking about how sometimes people actually go overboard on the hours. The hours are not like a panacea cure, and it's not some contest where you're like, oh, I need to get 10,000 hours. I mean, like, maybe you do if you need that job, right? And I think a lot of people who have really, really high numbers of clinical are career changers who were already working in healthcare full time, and that's how they were racking up 2,000 hours a year, because that's what happens if you work a full-time job. And that's great, right? That can be a real asset. It's not a ticket to med school any more than a 4.0 is, or a 520 plus MCAT is. No one of those things is going to suddenly be the number that makes it, because it is about the holistic review. But it's the same for PA school, right? You still have to have the overall stats and experience, but that benefit of any kind of prior clinical experience before you switch to a different kind of clinical work is you are proving to yourself that you like patient interaction.
Absolutely. I thought it was interesting. We saw this week. The National PA Professional Organization voted. The board of that organization voted. I think it was just this week, right,
just
Rachel?
This week? Yeah, Monday or Tuesday.
Voted to that they were in support of renaming it as, instead of being a physician assistant, it was a physician associate. And this is really, I think, to differentiate what the PA does and what a medical assistant does, for example, or whatever. And it really does emphasize the important nature of the role of the PA in American healthcare in the 21st century. This is a mid-level provider, similar to, not exactly the same, but very similar to a nurse practitioner, where they have intermediate they're that sort of mid-level provider, and in many cases, physicians' offices, clinics, and hospitals depend greatly on the PA for a lot of the healthcare that goes on. So it's a great career, and one that I think we are excited that MAPT is going to begin to help students track. And in fact, Rachel, do you want to say a few words about that, about MAPT?
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't get, because I had some tech issues at my my MAP timeline, I didn't get to demo the PA side of it. So it seems like, and maybe you guys can type in the comments too and tell me, maybe write in med, PA, or both. So we get a sense of who's who with watching. But the sense I have so far from the questions and comments is that we've got some people considering both options here. And you may then already know that MAPT is available currently for pre-med students. But when Ryan Gray and I started building MAPT, I mean, we actually started building it like tech-wise about a year ago, but we started building it in our heads years ago. And we were always envisioning all healthcare professionals. We just knew we were going to start with med because that's Ryan's niche. It's a really big group. It's just that's a logical starting point. But what we are working on here and we'll have ready to go in the course of the next probably 5 or 6 weeks is a version of MAPT that looks just like it does now, except when you log in, it says, hey, are you pre-med or are you pre-PA? And you'll be able to toggle. So you're not going to be locked in. So for those of you that are going, well, I'm still figuring that out, it's going to be extremely similar. But when you're on the pre-PA side, it's going to be asking you about GRE and PA CAT. And when you're on the med side, it's going to be asking you about MCAT. When you're on the pre-med side, it's going to have the applications activities listed as they are at AMCAS and ACOMAS and TMD SAS. And when you're on the PA side, it's going to have the activities listed as they are on the PCAS, PACAS, the liaison group for PAs.
CASPA. CASPA.
It's different. I knew it was different. Sorry, guys. I'm still working on my fluency. It did also take me about a year to learn to say TMD SAS instead of TEMDAS. Sometimes initialism and acronyms throw me for a loop for some reason. But yeah, so MAPT is coming. And if you're on our email list, if you're signed up for nationalpremedday.com or you're signed up at the email on map.com, we will keep you posted. So we'll make sure that you know when the PA stuff is available. But yeah, I think we're looking at probably just after the 4th of July. So not too long.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Very exciting. And, I think one of the things too that we need to talk about a little bit with regard to PAs is the importance of students shadowing PAs. This is very important to in the PA world. They want you to have good, strong clinical experience, but they very much want you to know that you've had a lot of experience shadowing PAs, so that you understand exactly what PAs do, what their role is in the team, on the healthcare team, what the centrality of their position is, and how important it is, but what the limitations are as well, what the responsibilities are. It's very important to kind of be that element of the provider for them. Hey, looks like we finally got worked out some technical difficulties, and I think we got Matt here. Hey, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you for joining us today. Everybody, this is Matt Music, our PA guest today. Matt, it's really wonderful to see you. We've been talking all about PAs so far, and so why don't you tell us, give us a little bit of info on your journey into the life of a PA. We understand that you were an RN first, and then went to PA school. Tell us about what was that all about? Why did you make that decision?
So I started as an RN. I even got my BSN and started working in ICU as an RN. But I felt that that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to do more. So I decided to go into PA school, and also I wanted to work in surgery. So I applied for PA school and got into a program. And I think it's one of the best choices I've made. So
That's awesome. That is awesome. And tell us about PA school. What was PA school like?
So my program, it's a master's program. My program was 34 months, which is one of the longer ones, but it was 3 years. So first year was, didactic learning in the classroom. You're learning anatomy, physiology, you do cadaver lab. You also learned pharmacology, pathology, all of these, fundamental things. It's basically like medical school, but condensed and a lot faster. So that was the first year. The second year was all like specific systems like cardiology, pediatrics, OBGYN. So all of these specific specialties that you need to know. And then the third year was all clinical rotations. So we had 13 months of clinical rotations. 2 of those were surgery. So I did general surgery, and plastics was the elective that I chose. So I got to do 2 months of plastics plus general surgery. So I felt like it really prepared me to jump into the world of surgery and the area, that I wanted to practice in the inpatient setting.
Yeah. Now, did you know going into it that you wanted to go into neurosurgery, or was that just sort of happened? Or tell me about that.
Well, originally I wanted plastics. That's what I went into school for. I knew I needed surgery. But that's what I wanted, was to be in surgery. But when I graduated school, I was looking for jobs, and I noticed that there was a neurosurgery position open. So I applied for it because I thought it was interesting as well. And I started working in neurosurgery from that point. As soon as that was my first job after graduating, and I've been in it ever since.
Yeah. And how long is that?
So I'm going on 6 years since I've graduated school, and I've been in neurosurgery and spine surgery now for 6 years.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, tell us, Matt, a little bit just generally about what you do on a daily basis. What does your life look like? And I know we've talked before about how different, even within the context of your of the neurosurgery group that you work for, that some of the PAs do different things, and some do and what you do, and then others do more of the surgical part of it, I guess, or whatever. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Tell us a little bit about what you do on a daily basis and how that differentiates between different PAs.
Sure. Well, currently I work for a neurosurgery group in Austin, Texas, and we have 2 different kinds of roles for the APPs, which are advanced practice providers, kind of the umbrella term for NPs and PAs. The first role is called a one-to-one position. So basically one of the nurse practitioners or PAs is assigned to one surgeon. So they follow all of the patients for that surgeon. They do the clinic with that surgeon. They assist in surgeries for that surgeon. The role that I have is called an inpatient team. So I do 12-hour shifts where I will go in, I'll round on patients in ICU, on the floors. I don't do any clinic with this position, but I do also assist in the OR when needed. And also see consults in the emergency room. So it's a little bit of everything, but it's not assigned to one physician, so to speak. You're kind of a general.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you say assist in surgery, tell us a little bit about what that actually means. What do you
Mm-hmm.
do when you're there with in a brain surgery or in a spine surgery? What would your role be?
So I think the main role is you're the extra pair of hands for the surgeon. So that means you're constantly helping them to visualize things, whether that's, making sure that the blood is out of the way so they can see the spine or brain tissue. Maybe you need to irrigate things. You need to assist in retracting things. Basically, any way that you can assist them and just jump in and be those extra pair of hands so they can get the job done faster and better. That's what you're going to be doing. And then when the surgery is finished, they usually let you close. So in a brain surgery, I'll assist in putting the bone flap back on, and then sewing the galea and the skin back together for the scalp. Spine surgery as well, closing the fascia, the subcutaneous, and then the skin. And then, you're in charge of seeing them after the surgery, rounding on them every day, changing their dressings every day. So you're there just as, assisting them however you can, just to get the job done better and faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It sounds like it's a very hands-on kind of a job.
Very.
Yeah. Now, when you are rounding on patients, what does that kind of look like? What do you actually do when you're doing that?
Okay, so when I go in the morning, we get the rundown from the night shift on all of the patients, and then we kind of divvy up the patients that we need to round on. So usually we start in ICU. We'll go to the surgical ICU and round on those patients. We go do neuro exams. We look at their drain outputs. If they have like a ventriculostomy drain, or an external ventricular drain, we'll look at that, the different pressures like ICPs, and this is neurosurgery, but other specialties have their specific things. So we're looking at all those things, doing exams, and then we formulate a plan. So after we've rounded on all the patients, then we go back. You have to chart all of those notes for all of the patients you've seen. And then you also are putting in orders. You're looking at lab values. You're looking at MRIs and CTs, X-rays. So you're doing like all of the major groundwork. And then we do talk with the surgeon, the physician, to finalize a plan before we end up initiating it. Most things you can do on your own autonomously, but the bigger decisions, of course, with neurosurgery, we do have to bounce off of the physician. But, all of the daily things and the smaller decision making, you're making those decisions. So you do get to practice somewhat autonomously, but you are also working with a physician for that each patient.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier that you had been an RN, you had a BSN, and that you went into PA school, but that in your current work, there are both PAs and nurse practitioners. Now, why did you choose to go the route of a PA school as opposed to going the route of as a nurse practitioner?
Right. I know each state differs with responsibilities and independence with different roles. In the state of Texas, essentially nurse practitioners are equally as powerful as a PA, but I liked the PA school model instead. I think since I wanted to go into surgery, I think it better prepared me to be able to jump into that because it's part of my training in school, and you are able to first assist and bill for that. So it was very good for me personally to be in that model of education. I also felt it better prepares you because it teaches you all of these fundamental things in medicine that you need to know. In nurse practitioner school, they also do that just in a different way. They pretty much add to the education and experience that you already have as a nurse, but you are selected to have a track of whether it's family nurse practitioner or acute care. So you're not able to have as a wide variety of practice as a PA does. So graduating from school, I could go psychology, I could do surgery, I could do pediatrics, I can do clinic, inpatient, outpatient. You can pick any area of medicine that you want to work in. So I thought that overall it was a better choice because I was able to choose surgery and just jump right in without having to do a first assist program or any further training after I graduated.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Excellent. We had a question earlier from a student who was wondering about, trying to make decisions with regard to whether he was going to apply to PA school or medical school. And I'm just wondering, did it go through your mind in this process of maybe applying to medical school, or were you pretty committed to the PA route of things, or did you consider med school at one point? And if so, why did you choose PA instead of going to med school? Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I originally wanted PA from the beginning. I didn't want to do the 4 years of medical school. For neurosurgery, it's 7 years of residency plus 1 to 2 years of fellowship. So you're looking at 12 years maybe of training after your undergraduate work. So I liked the PA role best because you still get to enjoy some of the fun of surgery and making decisions and practicing medicine, but you don't get the full responsibility as a surgeon or a physician does. So for me, it was a lifestyle choice where, yes, I do want to do this. I want to go to work. I want to have a pretty good salary. But yet I don't want to have that full responsibility or that lifestyle that a physician has, constantly being on call, constantly answering questions and dealing with situations and being the final say-so. But if that's for you, then maybe medical school is what you should do. But for me, I thought it was better to be the number 2 guy. And, I would be there and be able to come to work, do the work that I love to do, and then I get to leave work. It's a shorter training program. It is a master's degree. So it's only 3 years versus however many years I said before, 11, 12 years to work in the same field. So for me, I thought it was the best choice.
Yeah, good. So we have a question from Christian. Christian says, can a doctor switch you from another surgical physician associate if he doesn't like the way you work with him or her, or are you stuck working with that doctor during your employment? So I guess, does that make sense? You understand the question?
So if the surgeon or doctor doesn't like how I'm working with him, he wants to switch to another one. Is that?
Yeah. How does that work?
So when you sign on to work with a physician, generally there's supposed to be like a collaborative agreement. You interview, you get the job, but then you and your physician sit down and talk about what is it that my role is going to be, what are the things that I can do, what are the things that I shouldn't do that maybe he or she should be doing. So you kind of iron out those things and it becomes like a working relationship at that point, which is why I think it's good that they changed the term to associate, because you are an extension of that physician, but yet you're also working alongside with them. So you develop that relationship with them. And if it does not work out, then, usually what they'll do is give you a grace period. So many days where you can find another physician to work with or another job, and vice versa. If you don't like the physician that you're working with, then usually there is a grace period for you to find that also. Mm-hmm. And I've dealt with that before. There are different personalities out there, and some people clash and some people get along very well. So just like any relationship, there's going to be this period of getting to know each other and learning your physician. I think that's probably half of the job, is learning how your physician does certain things and treatment modalities. So it's just a process of getting to know each other.
Yeah. Because and I guess it depends a little bit also on how big the practice is. Right. If there are multiple surgeons, then there may be opportunities to switch to a different surgeon. If it's just a lone practice or whatever, then more limited. But the bigger the practice, the more opportunities that exist, I would guess.
And I have worked in different settings. I've worked in the hospital setting for a group of surgeons. I've also worked in private practice with one surgeon, both of which have their pros and cons. So it's just basically whatever fits best for you and what you think is comfortable with how you can work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, tell us a little bit about your lifestyle. So you mentioned how you were really wanting to have a lifestyle friendly role, job, and has it turned out to be the way you had anticipated it that it would be? Has being a PA, in your case a surgical PA, worked out the way that you had anticipated?
So far, yes, it has been good. I will say my first job was pretty hour intensive. I was working 60 hours a week, and so 5 12-hour shifts, but I still had my weekends off, never was asked to be on call for the weekend. So when you're off of work, you are off of work, and most physicians will respect that and will not bother you. Especially if you're working like in a hospital setting with multiple PAs or APPs, you're able to set your time of work, and then when you're not at work, you're not there. So other people take over and pick up those responsibilities. But yeah, I think overall it has been a good choice for me. Right now I'm working in a hospital setting. I work 3 to 4 days a week for 12-hour shifts. So when I'm at work, I'm there. And then when I'm not, I have my own free time. So there are, a few days during the week that I don't work, that I'm off. So I can, kind of move those days around, maybe do a short trip here and there, or spend time with friends. Or, if you want to do certain hobbies, you have your own life that is outside of work. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that seemingly would be one of the real benefits of the life of a PA would be that lifestyle choice.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Let's see. I just want to encourage the group. If you have any questions for Matt, surgical PA here in Austin, Texas, if you have any questions, chime in. We'll try to get to those as we go along. Matt, I'm interested in what do you think makes a good PA? What is it that what kind of personality traits or what kind of interests or whatever? What is it that makes a person a good PA?
So I think it's a few different things. I think one of the important things is being able to interact with people well, to talk and explain things. I've heard many times that, people love to visit the PA instead of the doctor in a clinic or in a hospital, because we take the time to explain things, to relate to them. And I just think that to be, that kind of warm and informative person who's compassionate and helping people, I think that goes a long way, as well as, you have to be smart and pay attention to detail and, be able to critically think and problem solve. So it's more than just having the education down. There's also, you have to be able to connect to people.
Yeah. Seemingly that's a big plus if somebody can connect with their now when you were applying for PA school, it was very similar to the med school process, right? In terms of there was a common application that all the PA schools around the country use, or most of them use. And did you have to interview at the PA school where you were ultimately accepted?
Yes. So I got through the gauntlet of the CASPA application and then I was selected for an interview for the program that I attended. So they selected so many applicants to interview in 3 or 4 different waves. So I was selected for one of those. They basically do like an orientation process of what their program is like, what their curriculum consists of, what the day-to-day activities would be, which basically is classwork and studying all the time. You don't really have much time for anything other than that in PA school. But so they were able to talk about those things, and then you would go and interview either individually with some of the faculty members or with like a small panel of them. I really felt that my program was looking more at the person. Of course, the education and things that would get you into the program, but also looking at you as a person, who you are, and making sure that, again, you have that ability to connect with people. And I think that they picked a very good group of students with their selection process. So it was a full day of interviewing and getting to know the facility and the faculty.
Yeah, yeah. Now, shadowing PAs is really important for that process, right? If we were talking about this earlier before you joined us, we were talking about how important it is that students who are interested in applying to PA school have some really substantial experience shadowing PAs, so they really know what they're getting into and what the lifestyle is like, and the work is all about. Do you agree with that?
I think it is important to do some shadowing. Before I applied for PA school, I did shadow a surgical PA. She was cardiothoracic PA, so she would scrub into the surgery. She would harvest the saphenous veins, get it prepared for the bypass. So it was really interesting to see how she had her own part of the surgery that she could do on her own, and also that the physician relied on her to do those things. So it was a good eye-opener just to see what a physician associate actually does on a daily basis. So you get an idea of what it is that you would be doing after you finish the program. And I know that some programs do require some shadowing, or they recommend for you to do some shadowing. My recommendation is to find out what those programs actually ask you to do and what they recommend to do, and I would do that. So if that means, we recommend so many 100 hours of shadowing, I would do that. Make sure that you have all of those hours, because it is a very competitive program to get in, just from the sheer number of applicants. So you have to be someone that stands out, and someone that I would also say get everything done early, not just on time, but get it done as early as you can.
Yeah.
Because it is a small window that you have to get through to get accepted.
Yeah. And PA school is pretty competitive. I mean, I think in some ways it's more competitive than medical schools, because the class sizes are pretty small. Is that right? I mean, how many were in your class?
So I actually had one of the bigger classes. We had 75 people in my class, but usually most programs would only take 35, 40 students each year. Part of that is because they also have to find the clinical sites for you to rotate through. So I think some programs are beginning to do bigger class sizes, but out of 75 people in my class, I think there were at least 1,400 applicants.
Wow.
So, and then based on 1,400 applicants, they only accept so many for interviews, and then of course so many for the class.
Right.
So just sheer numbers alone, it is very competitive.
Yeah. And just for a shout out to your alma mater, you tell us where you went to PA school.
So I went to PA school in UNT Health Science Center, which is based in Fort Worth, Texas. It's an extension of the UNT system in Denton, Texas, and they had worked with what used to be a DO program. So they've merged and now have all kinds of various programs there, and I felt that it was a very good program to get my education.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Matt, it's been a delight having you here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great, and good luck to you with your work and the special things that you do for patients in the hospital there and stuff. And so, anyway, thanks again so much, Matt, for joining us.
Yeah,
sure,
thank you,
welcome.
Matt. And maybe we can have you back one day, since we had some tech issues today, so we can dig a little deeper with you, if you'd be interested. Or pre-AP students, if Matt can't make it, we'll find someone else to try to make up some of that lost time. But we're thrilled that you were able to carve us out in your day after all of our little hiccups.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matt.
Oops. I won't touch you. Yeah. So Scott, I know you have this intro, but I just wanted to chime in again because, you know, it was a pre-PA mini track, but we didn't need to make it even minier. So just for our future physician assistant, future physician associates, we're going to keep on schedule today because this 4:30 or 1:30 Pacific session is an all-in. So we're going to run that as scheduled, but we do have one more pre-PA track with Rodolin after this. So in an hour and 45 minutes. And then, yeah, I mean, we're adding pre-PA to the mapped mix, so we will definitely have more sessions and give you lots more opportunities. I'm glad we were able to get you a little something today, but I just wanted to reassure you more is coming.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All
So we are pretty much on schedule, I think now,
Yeah,
and so we're gonna be joined by my dear friend, Dr. Layla Harrison, and I'll bring you on, Layla. And there you go. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, friend?
I'm doing well. It's so good to see you. It's always a delight to get to see you, Layla. So thank you for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about COVID, and I know that in a lot of ways we're all tired of COVID, and we have COVID, what's come to be known as COVID fatigue, I think, in the world around us. But students are very concerned, about COVID and about how it's affecting the admissions process. I will say that we did a Inside Med Admissions a couple of months ago about COVID, an hour-long conversation with Dr. Harrison, as well as a couple of other admissions deans from around the country, and that was a great exercise. You can find that on our YouTube channel and see a lot of the responses that were given there. But before we get too much into COVID, I do want to give you an opportunity, Layla, to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are and what you're doing and what your role at your school is. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, happy to do that. Hi everyone. So glad that so many people are joining for this awesome event today. So I am Dr. Layla Harrison, and I am the Senior Associate Dean for Admissions and Student Affairs at Washington State University Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine. We're a new medical school. We just graduated our inaugural class. Yay to that. And so that's a big woohoo for sure. But I've had almost a 2-decade career in medical education. Much of that experience has been in medical school admissions. This is the third medical school I've worked for. I worked for both MD and DO programs across both in the southern and now western region. But in addition to that, I am pretty heavily involved nationally with the AAMC and also some new ventures with the ACGME, which is the accreditation body for residency programs. But in all, my experience really is heavily focused in admissions. I really love holistic review. I am involved with the AAMC in conducting holistic review workshops for medical schools and also residency programs to help them develop holistic selection processes. Enrollment management principles, and just other aspects in terms of doing a good job about of selecting the right candidates for a program into it. And then now in my role with student affairs, once we get them in, supporting them through the 4 years, and then supporting them in their residency applications and match process into residency. So the full gamut.
So you're a busy lady.
Yeah, it never ends, right? There's just always something going on, which is good.
Right. That's funny. Well, we all know that the COVID has really affected things. It has shut down the world around us, and it's made it a much more difficult process in a variety of different ways. And so I'm wondering if you can just give us a brief overview of how has COVID affected your school, and how is your school responding to COVID?
I think, I think about our school specifically, and I know this was not unique to us by any means. I mean, the impact when COVID hit was certainly our students that were in clerkships having to be pulled out of clerkships. And, that was a pretty significant impact. I think that third-year students across the country and fourth-year students were facing last year. And then just kind of weathering through that when they could re-enter the clerkship space, and just helping, do what we can to support students through all of the stressors that came with COVID. And then the onset of the vaccines and in ensuring that they had access, when you had to get a vaccine, given that they were treating patients and taking care of patients. I think that, and then of course, I think all of us have personally been impacted in our work and our personal lives, but working from home since last March has been an interesting change in terms of supporting current students. And then when you think of applicants, I mean, just hearing consistently across the country from our colleagues and applicants that we talk with about the barriers to gaining experiences for their upcoming applications, concerns about getting to know their faculty well enough to ask for a letter of recommendation, concerns that they're not getting exposure to the profession to have a competitive application, and so on. A lot of these unknowns and these new things that I think we're all encountering because of the pandemic. So.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into some of the specifics about this, about how medical schools are responding to COVID. And obviously one of the biggest ways that initially had to be dealt with was the interview process. And tell us a little bit about how that has changed, how COVID has changed how you're interviewing students.
Absolutely. I forgot about that one in the midst of all the things, right? So that was a big change the last year that occurred that I think we're going to continue to see into this cycle. We couldn't expect, there was really no traveling happening last year, and we couldn't expect for applicants to risk their safety and health to travel for interviews. So I imagine all the medical schools transitioned to virtual interviews last cycle. And I would venture to say that the far majority of them will continue with a virtual cycle this upcoming year. And it was an interesting shift because we had to figure out, it's a big deal for a medical school to bring applicants to its campus to be able to say, look, you could live in the city. These are our facilities, meet our people in person. To shift all of that to occur virtually, was not easy. And I think for schools where they do bring in the majority of their medical students from outside of the city, having to sell your city, having to sell what you have to offer, it's not always easy virtual. So, and then outside of that, the assessment process, right? Doing interviews and via Zoom for the most part. I think a lot of people use that platform, or they use other platforms to conduct their interviews. We, in a traditional or normal process, we used multiple mini interview process, and we attempted to do, not attempted, I shouldn't say attempted. We actually, my team, and this is not me, this is my team, conducted 2 MMI interviews for pathway programs last summer, and realized it's already resource intensive in person, but it's very hard virtually. And so we had to shift our interview modality last cycle, and then thinking about how we're going to shift again for this cycle and adapt. So a lot of shifting, but I will tell you what is really neat about this is that, one, I think it was the right decision, besides the health factor, to conduct virtual interviews, because it really sort of, I think, in some ways created equity in the process. I think there are still some issues of inequity we need to be thoughtful about, but it allowed applicants not to have the financial burden of traveling for interviews. I think they could take advantage of more opportunities that came their way in terms of interview invitations, where maybe in other circumstances or situations they may have had to choose which interviews to attend because of finances. So I think in that regard, it was really helpful, but it also forced us to be thoughtful about circumstances that applicants might be interviewing in and that may have no control over, and that shouldn't factor or influence our decisions about them. So I think there are silver linings that came from this experience, and a lot we've learned through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you anticipate, I mean, you sort of addressed this, do you anticipate that this current cycle, the 21 cycle, will be virtual interviews for most medical schools?
I think quite a few of us will continue that way. I think, and I think that could change. It could shift as we continue to receive good news in terms of the pandemic and health status and so on. That as we get closer to the interview cycle, that potentially some medical schools might say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and shift back to in person. But I think that there are a good group of medical students that are saying, or I'm sorry, medical schools that are saying, this worked really well. There were some really good things about this. We're going to continue down this path, this cycle. That is definitely the case with us. And I definitely have spoken with a good, group of colleagues who are following a similar approach. But I do think that there could be shifting as the summer progresses and we know more. But I would venture to say that a good I don't know. It's hard to put out numbers, right? But
Right.
a good amount of the medical schools will continue with a virtual cycle this year. I think,
Yeah.
Dr. Wright, one of the other things too that is interesting, not to say that this necessarily influences what medical schools do, but there's comment too. The residency programs have not yet decided whether they'll have a virtual cycle or not, and it'll be interesting to see. Because it's the
Mhm.
same process. It's just 4 years later, but to see does that have any influence?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we go along, I'm gonna begin integrating some questions from the students in, and one of them really relevant to what we're talking about right now is this question: what sort of things has your school done to ensure that students get a good sense of the school culture? Are there virtual tours, speaking with current students? Is that still possible, et cetera? So tell us. I mean, this is a big issue, I know, for the medical schools as well as for the students in terms of trying to figure out, is this a good fit for me or not? So talk a little bit about that.
Right. I can't imagine moving to a city you've never really been to before because you got into their medical school. I know that must be difficult. Yeah. So like for our program, we really wanted to be thoughtful about that piece that let them get to know us truly the way that we are if they were here with us in person. I think our interview day, the way that we set it up, in and of itself really set the tone. We heard from applicants consistently that I really got a good feel for this school. I got a good feel for the people. But we also created an online resource page where we did develop virtual tours of the facilities. We also engaged our current medical students to develop a tour based off of a student perspective, the kinds of things and the places that they hung out and the resources that they used on campus. And it was all narrated by them. So it was, from their lens, which I think was really neat. We have virtual office hours. We have virtual tours are a possibility. We're always willing to connect with our current medical students. We developed more mini webinars to put online. So just really, it forced us to develop a lot more resources to help applicants to get a good sense of who we are. And I really, from the feedback that we got from our applicants and then those that are coming into the class, I think that they did get a good sense of who we are. I think that these things that I'm listing out for our program aren't uncommon. I think medical schools across the country, develop these resources and more even.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It really kind of caught everybody off guard. I mean, it was not, you kind of had to really switch on a dime in terms of figuring out what are we going to do to make this happen, because everything kind of shut down right almost as the cycle was beginning to get started last year. And so kudos to you guys for just everything that you did to make it all happen. It must have been pretty crazy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was, the AAMC developed a new tool last year that we utilized in our process called Vita. So having to work with our programmers, even of implementing that into the program that we use to assess in our interview day, even background changes like that, to just strategizing on what do we need to do? How do we answer questions that applicants are going to have? It was a whirlwind. I'm amazed not only with applicants and their ability to adjust and kind of roll with things, but also the resilience of the medical schools and the admissions teams and adjusting so much as well.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the we're getting a common theme on some questions right now in terms of what do you see as good as coming out of COVID? And you addressed this a little bit previously with the lack of finances with some students had, and that the virtual interviewing really made an impact on their ability to interview at schools. What are there other things that you see that have really made a major impact? And I guess this even goes to addressing you're putting your student affairs hat on, the things that your current students are having to do. How has that impacted, the curriculum, the what the students are doing that are already in medical school? Seemingly there's some positive things that have come out of this.
I think without a doubt, I think we do need to look at I call them the silver linings of the pandemic, right? What things were we forced to adapt to that ended up being really good changes? I think we became more proficient and better at communicating with our applicants.
Mm-hmm.
I sent way more correspondence, I think, to our applicant pool this cycle just to keep them informed, updated. I think also, I believe we're always empathizing with what it feels like to be an applicant in this really hard process any year, but really forcing conversations, healthy and good conversations among the medical schools about these circumstances, like what a bias, for example, what we need to be really thoughtful about how external aspects about an applicant that they have no control over might be impacting our decisions. So, more training and of our interviewers of they may not control who's walking in the background of the room, or that their dog's barking, or different things, or frankly, we had applicants who were interviewing in their car, or because that was the only quiet space that they had, and there's nothing wrong with that. And really helping to shift sort of the expectation in this space or in this context of medical education about what is appropriate and what is the right thing to say. Not everybody has the same access or the same options, and that shouldn't matter in their interview. And so I think silver linings are maybe greater, but also just different lens in terms of bias. I think the virtual process, us wanting to continue that here, not only because I think it does help with equity in terms of applicants not needing to worry about traveling to us to interview, but I mean, the truth is that this pandemic has also put a financial crunch on institutions, and we saved a lot of money not having applicants have to come to us to interview. And, I think that is a real consideration for some programs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the resource page, we never had an online resource page before where we recorded interviews that or videos, and collected a lot of different information that we provided to them prior to the interview. That we never did that before, and we're like, this is great. This is and we were able to use that for like second look. And once we accepted, but when you accept an applicant off the wait list, it's been months since they interviewed. They can refer back to their information.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Wright, I'll tell you another really exciting thing that it didn't necessarily come from the pandemic, because this idea came to us before this. But it has served us so well in the pandemic, and that is our students from the Student National Medical Association, or SNMA, had come to us probably late 2019 and said, we want to provide mock interviews for all the applicants that are invited to interview at our medical school. It's totally student-led. And they developed a program, we call it the CAMI Project, and they developed a program whereby every applicant that we interview, we offer them to do a mock interview with our medical students. And the medical students totally lead this. They arrange this, they train, we help train, but they train every student that wants to be involved. And in particular, they bring in not only SNMA, but students from our other different identity groups, other ethnic or racial identity groups, LGBTQ+ student organization, non-traditional students, military medical students. And so that the applicant can select which of those student groups they would want the interviewer to come from. And it's a way also to show the applicants Like I, identify with this group. And so that's somebody I want to do a mock interview with me. And this is amazing. More than about half of our applicant pool that we interviewed participated in a mock interview. We had over 80 medical students across the 4 years that were mock interviewers. And this is a project that's going to continue. And they did it virtually, right? And so you're going to have a virtual interview. Let's do a virtual mock interview. And often, when applicants are doing mock interviews, they'll choose somebody that's comfortable to them, somebody they know, right? Because it's too scary to go ask some random stranger to do a mock interview, right? Or a professor or something. Well, this simulated that experience. Your interview is going to be with strangers, and these students are strangers to them. So I think that also assisted. So that was a cool thing that came out of this too.
Oh wow, what a awesome program. That's,
yeah.
I mean, kudos to your students
they're amazing
for thinking about that. That's really incredible. That's really cool. Tell us a little bit about how your admissions committee, the lens that they're using to view, for example, shadowing and clinical exposure. This is a very chief concern of many applicants, is that essentially for the entirety of 2020 and for many of them still now in 2021, the opportunities that they have to find shadowing experiences, to find clinical experiences are very limited. And how is your admissions committee, and I'm sure you've had colleagues around the country that you've discussed this with as well, how are medical schools, really adjusting that lens that they're seeing applicants through, knowing that there may be a limitation on what the applicants have been able to do?
Yeah, and this is, I think, the one of the places that I really empathize with applicants, because it's really stressful when you have no access. I mean, if we're having trouble getting our first and second years access to the clinical space, it's definitely impacting their pre-meds. In our program specifically, we don't have any specific, like when we talk about healthcare, when we want to see healthcare experience, it doesn't have to be a certain kind of healthcare experience. It doesn't have to be shadowing. It doesn't have to be hospital volunteering. It can be being a care provider for a family member. That we look at that positively. We don't require a specific number of hours. So I think for us, we already had some flexibility built in to allow us to be thoughtful. But I think this coming cycle, even more than last cycle, we're going to see even a bigger impact in applications regarding this aspect. I think that, one of the hard things on the side of the medical school is that often the reason the requirement exists to have healthcare exposure is that we want to make sure that you have some sort of informed reason and some sort of exposure to inform your decision to pursue medicine. You're not making this into this. It's the perfect career. You watched Grey's Anatomy and this is why you want to do this career kind of thing, but that you really kind of have a grounded idea. And granted, you're not going to always get that grounded idea just by shadowing or volunteering in a hospital. I think that medical schools are definitely having these conversations about what are applications going to look like and how do we need to be flexible. We're also going to see a variation, right? You're going to see the re-applicants or the more non-traditional applicants who have had the ability longer term to gain that experience versus traditional applicants who are juniors in college right now that are applying in their senior year and have probably had fewer opportunities. So I think that, virtual experiences, I think a lot of medical schools are, if not all of them, are going to be thinking about how to be open to virtual shadowing, virtual experiences, conversations with physicians, other kind of creative ways of at least just showing that you have made an informed decision, talking about it more in depth. I think this is where it's really important for applicants to get into the research literature, inform themselves about things like social determinants of care, about how the pandemic itself has impacted different populations, health disparities, just like start to inform themselves about the deeper level aspect of health, so that even if they haven't had a lot of exposure, they're at least informing themselves in these other ways as well. So I think there are those things. I think the other thing that I get concerned about is that there are hospitals, clinics, and probably other entities that are creating paid virtual shadowing or paid healthcare experiences. And that's really concerning to me because it really then further sets apart groups of applicants, whereas not everybody is going to be able to afford those kinds of opportunities. And medical school should not favor those that can. We really need to be thoughtful about equity and access. And so I think we're going to probably see more of those kinds of things coming up. And we won't necessarily know that they were paid experiences, right? Because I don't think that that's not necessarily going to come up in the application. But we need to be thoughtful that if applicants, those that had access and those that not have, or let me put it this way, those that do not have the experiences on their application, but they're able to really kind of, in a dialogue and narrative, talk about what their understanding is or their own experiences. We need to be careful about favoring those that have the experiences in the most recent year in the pandemic, and why that is, and the access that might have been there, and conversely, those that didn't have access. So we need to be careful and thoughtful of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It also emphasizes, it seems like in my mind, not for everybody, certainly, but don't wait. In other words, if you're a freshman in college, don't wait. You never know what's going to happen. When you have opportunities, take the opportunities. Begin early and do it throughout your experience. And I think what many of the pre-meds that we're dealing with now, they waited until that junior year, and we're expecting to, they maybe had something lined up for the junior year that they were going to do, and it falls through because of COVID, and they're stuck with nothing because they waited until that point. So begin early in your process, I think is a very important point to be made. And you're shaking your head. I'm assuming you're definitely agreeing with that.
Well, I think applicants need to understand that admissions committees look at longevity in experiences as well. If you have just several one-time type things and you're not spending committed time in some, not necessarily healthcare, but any experience, we're wondering why. And absolutely, you should be engaging long-term in experiences, not necessarily all healthcare. It could be community service and other things, but that record in terms of the timeline is also important. In addition to what the experience actually is. So definitely. And the other thing I'll share, Dr. Scott or Dr. Wright, is that I think that, I'm so used to calling you Scott, I'm trying to call you Dr. Wright here.
That's all right. Either way.
Is that, the other thing is that, I think sometimes, and I'm speaking more of, I think, the traditional applicant, somebody who is straight from high school into college and is a junior and planning to apply to medical school in their senior year and then enroll in medical school right after that. I'm thinking of more of that kind of applicants. Is that they oftentimes it's this burden or this feeling as though this is the timeline. This is the only time frame in which I can apply to medical school, and they have their life planned out, which is not a bad thing to plan your life. But sometimes I think being flexible and giving yourself grace, that it's okay to shift that. And maybe if you're in that situation right now where you really are not going to have a whole lot of experiences to report in your application, do you want to spend all that money and time in this process? Or is it better to back up and say, you know what? I think I'm going to take a gap year or gap years, and I'm going to do some other experiences. That's where I'm going to gain the experiences. I'm going to apply, in a year or two. There is nothing wrong with that. I think it's more of them letting go of that perfect timeline and saying it's okay to do that. I think applicants need to understand, and I feel comfortable, I think, speaking broadly for this, is that medical schools are not looking for one specific timeline for applicants. We're looking for a well-rounded candidate that has experiences that aligns with our mission. Not that we're from high school to college and we're straight into medical school. In fact, like at our medical school, we enroll more non-traditional students. These are people that have had other careers, have been out and enrolled a little bit. So be flexible if that is better than trying to force an application this cycle.
Yeah, I've often said there's as many timelines as there are applicants. Everybody's got a story and everybody's got plans, and that's okay. There's no one sort of magic timeline that says this is what you ought to do or should do or whatever. So that's absolutely. Caleb, Marsh, chimes in and says, "Preach it."
Hi, Caleb.
Exactly. So we do have a good question here, and I think this goes back to the issue of access to healthcare and that. But Trey says, because shadowing and clinical experience is limited, do you think our own personal experiences as a patient, if we were at one long term, would be beneficial, since it shows we've been exposed to hospitals, for example? What are your thoughts about that?
I would say absolutely. Now, I might be speaking more for my medical school on this, but I would say absolutely. I mean, frankly, you might have more experiences by being a patient, especially a long-term patient, and having exposure to physicians and procedures and hospitals and other care contexts than somebody who is shadowing or volunteering in a hospital, right? So you likely have more perspective and insights and understanding of what it means to be cared for, and thus what kind of physician you want to be. So don't minimize that. I would say absolutely, if you feel comfortable, tell medical schools about that. And I really would hope that medical schools would be thoughtful about considering that experience.
Yeah, and we also hear the similar, about caring for loved ones or caring for family members, etc., and how important that it has been in their journey, and they often minimize that because it's not officially clinical, or it wasn't an official program or something, but something that definitely they should put on their application. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, because I think when you're in those roles, not only are you caring for your loved one, but you are likely also interacting with healthcare professionals. You're interacting with insurance. You're interacting with some of these other aspects of medicine that I think a lot of applicants don't get exposure to. They don't understand. They're pursuing a career that sounds amazing, and they're this perfect career, and they are not thinking about all of the behind the scenes things that we'll be dealing with as a physician, that when you're in a care provider role or a patient yourself, you're seeing some of those behind the scenes things that you'll be dealing with as a physician. So I actually think it gives probably more of a realistic understanding of what the career entails. I think also, you have a lot of applicants that have family members that they serve as interpreters for. Now, there's a lot of things surrounding that in terms of, whether that's the right thing and so on, but they are sometimes put in that position to have to do that, have to communicate on behalf of their loved ones. Again, they're getting exposure for all of the kind of behind the scenes, or just even what care looks like. So I think those things, I think sometimes applicants, and I think this is not applicants' fault. I think we need to be better as medical schools in being transparent and better describing what we're looking for. But it isn't just that you list a shadowing experience or that you are a hospital volunteer, but that you are able to convey these other experiences that you've had in a way to help us understand what your exposure has been. And some of these things are they're uncomfortable or they don't want to share them, which is totally okay too.
Absolutely. Another issue that comes up quite a bit is the pass-fail issue with schools having gone to pass-fail for some period of time. And some schools are still in a pass-fail kind of mode, or they give that option to students. Give us your perspective from your institution and your admissions committee on how this is viewed. Should students, if they're given the option to do that, should students become concerned about that? What are your thoughts about the whole pass-fail option and how that's going to affect their application?
So for our program, immediately when COVID hit last year, our admissions committee said we accept prerequisites and coursework pass-fail. So and we do specify the semesters in which we say that's approved, because our prerequisites, for example, they do have to be graded, but in this time we said they can be pass-fail. And we did learn, through that from pre-health advisors that in some cases, students did have the choice about whether they took a grade or not. The thing is I think that, well, so one, just across the board, we accept it, pass, fail, no question. We're not getting into that detail in the admissions committee meetings. We're not drilling into that. I think in terms of making the decision, if a student is faced with, do I take it pass, fail, or do I take it for a grade? You know, I think there are a lot of circumstances that probably come into that and that help inform that decision. And I think they need to make the decision that is best for them, period. I think that medical schools, I know for sure last year accepted pass, fail. I think again, moving into the cycle, I expect, you know, that would be this, it'll be the same for this coming cycle. So I think, I think if you're doing it because you think it'll be easier, then I would stop in the second, you know, kind of think through that reasoning. If there are other circumstances that it would be more helpful to take a pass fail, then take a pass fail. We're not going to know. We don't ask the question, and MCAS doesn't ask the question, did you have a choice of whether this was pass fail? So we're not going to, the medical schools are going to know the choice part of it. So I would say do what's best for you and what is going to set you up best for your medical education. That's what I would say is, if it's because it's an easier road, it's the same coursework, but you don't have to get the A versus the, you know, the C. If it's because it's easier, I would stop and think through that. But if it's because you have other circumstances, then do what's best for you.
Yeah. And we have had students who ask the question, you know, where they have a situation, let's say they're taking 4 classes and they choose the graded option for 3 of the classes and pass fail for 1 of the classes. What does that say to an admissions committee who they, you know, is this something that, you know, could potentially come up in an interview? Why did you choose pass fail for that particular class as opposed to the other classes which you got graded? Does the admissions committee, do the interviewers get that granular in their questioning and in their, you know, in wondering about that kind of stuff, or is it higher level than that?
You know, for the medical schools that do sort of an open file interview where they would get that information to begin with, you know, it's possible. I definitely in processes I've been with before where they did have access, they might drill down into specific classes and might ask the question, tell me about why this one is pass fail and this one, these are graded. And so I think that, first of all, I think applicants need to look at the schools that they're applying to and ask the question. You can email the admissions office if it's not clear about how interviews are conducted. And if they're open file and they would have that information, they should be prepared for that. Be prepared to answer honestly. But there are many of us as medical schools that do closed file interviews. Like in our process, they receive no aspect of the application to make that decision. So it wouldn't come up in the interview. If it were to come up in the admissions committee, I think this is where us as admissions deans, it's important for us to train our admissions committee members. Like I would tell our admissions committee members, we cannot assume whether or not the student had the choice to take that pass fail. So we should not be making any judgments based off of that. Take it as fact as it is and move on. Like don't assume that they chose. It could be that class specifically didn't have a choice. So, you know, I think we need to not make assumptions about students' decisions like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. Couple of other questions. This is an interesting one, particularly related to clinical experience. This particular Atalia says, I switched from vet med to instead to go to med school. I have lots of clinical experience in vet medicine, but I'm lacking in clinical experience with people. How will this be considered along with the pandemic?
Yeah, great question. I think we see these types of questions when it's related to like pharmacy tech, nursing experience, so other health professions experience more so than like with physicians. I would say I think it's still relevant. You're still understanding, you know, learning about procedures. I mean, and veterinarians still interact with people, right, that are the owners of their patients, and you know, there's still empathy, and how do you talk about a diagnosis in a way that the fur babies parents understand, you know. So I think that there are still relevant crossover there, and I think you should consider it. Now, for just like in the situation with Atalia and others that are maybe have had heavy exposure in other health professions, or maybe you're career changers, you'll still need to be able to adequately explain why you're shifting from vet med to medical school. And I think you should be able to do that. And I imagine you can. So, but I do think but what I think, Talia, in this question, what's important is that you make those connections. How the experiences that you had in your vet experiences, how do they relate with healthcare? So don't expect your readers, so us on the admissions side, to make the assumptions. You make those connections for us in your description of the experience, or maybe in your essays and so on. So, but I do think it's relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Talia had another one based on Trey's previous question. And that question was about the personal experience with medicine as a patient. Where would we put that in our medical school application, whether it was our own experience or a loved one? Your opinion on that, Layla?
Oh, that's a good question. So let me tackle the loved one first. I think the experience with a loved one could easily be listed as an experience in the experience section of the application. I feel like you could list the dates, you could list the hours, those kinds of things. The personal experience, I struggle with whether or not the most appropriate place is listed in the experiences section. I think, now kind of, on the cuff thinking about this, I think that's better described in a personal statement, but really being detailed in there about what you've learned to support your motivation. I think if you list it in the experiences section, it feels a little bit off there. Like it doesn't feel like it translates as well. But absolutely talk about it in the personal statements with enough context to help us understand what kind of exposure was this, how long are we talking about here.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've sort of covered some of these questions before. Nina has one. And this really goes back to the question about, in terms of your experience with the virtual interviews. You really talked about how you were impressed with the ability for your admissions committee to glean the information that they wanted that they needed from the virtual interviews. Do you see this going forward? We talked, I think, a couple of months ago during the Inside Med Admissions about how some schools are even considering a hybrid where they might give students a choice of whether they wanted to actually come to campus or do it virtually. Is this kind of fraught with danger signals, or do you feel like that this is a good option?
So when you're talking about applicants having the choice between doing a virtual interview or an in-person interview, I do think that there are issues with that because of comparability of the assessment process. I worry that there might be implicit bias or other things that come into play that could impact applicants in one mode or the other. And I've heard, in my conversations with colleagues, have had the same concern. Like if you start off virtual, carry the whole season should be virtual kind of thing. Now, when it comes to having experiences where we interview virtual and then offer opportunities to come to campus as like a visit, a second look kind of thing, which I think, many medical schools are talking about. That's a little bit different. And I think in those cases, they are talking about that being an option. It's optional to come to campus. Now, one of the things I think medical schools need to be thoughtful of and be transparent in their communication with applicants about is that if they offer the virtual, or not offer, if they have the virtual interview experience, but then they offer the optional follow-up in person, is that they convey whether or not that optional in person does have an influence in the decision making. Because if it does have an influence in the decision making, they really should be transparent with applicants about that. Then it's really no longer optional, right? If it's optional, truly optional, it should have no bearing whatsoever on the medical school's decision making. And they should communicate that clearly, because I can imagine on an applicant side, you're thinking, okay, I interviewed virtually and now they're inviting me back as this optional visit. If I don't go because I can't afford it, am I going to be jeopardizing my opportunity there? They should not be put in that position. We should be transparent about what we expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've reached the end of our time together, and Dr. Harrison, Dr. Layla Harrison, I just wanted to tell you that we are so happy for you to be here today. It's always a joy to get to see you and interact with you. And one of these days, I'm going to make it up to Spokane and see you. And
Please.
yeah, absolutely. And but thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful to interact with you, and I'm sure the students enjoyed. And we're really benefited by your comments and stuff like that. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you sometime soon.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity, and best wishes to all of you out there going down this path.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, we're going to go forward with our talks this afternoon. As you know, this is National Pre-Med Day, and we're excited to have all of our guests today. We are about ready to start our next session, which is another one in the PA track, top 10 pre-PA FAQs, and I'm waiting for our Rachel to be with us, I think I'm not sure. Let me see what our plans are here. Giovanni, do you actually know what our plan is here? Or oh, I see. So I'm supposed to. This is my fault. I am supposed to introduce our speaker today, and then I think she's going to take it from there. But let me add her to the stream. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us on National Pre-Med Day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
This year we have the National Pre-Med Day also doing PA stuff, and we've had a couple of really great interactions with questions and answers on PA, and I think you're going to really give us some important information on the top questions that students have about how to go forward on being a pre-PA student. Does that sound right?
Yep, I will.
Yeah. That sounds good. Well, why don't you spend a little bit of a time introducing yourself to us and letting us know kind of your experiences with PA and what you do, and I think that'd be a great intro for you.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name's Rodalyn Joseph. I am an emergency medicine physician assistant. I've been a PA for almost 5 years now, since August 2016. Absolutely love it. I love being a PA, and on top of that, I also love mentorship and building my platform dedicated to mentoring and helping pre-health and pre-PA students get into their respective programs. I also work with Dr. Ryan Gray, and I host a pre-PA e-shadowing, and I absolutely love it every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm just basically here to discuss frequently asked questions. Of course, I get asked questions all the time by pre-PA students on, help with getting into PA school, how to get into PA school. And so I'll be sharing some of the most frequently asked questions that I've received via emails, e-shadowing, and whatnot.
Awesome. So you've got some Q&A questions or some frequently asked questions that I think you're going to cover for us. Is that right?
Yep. I'm going to share my screen to open up my presentation.
Great.
All right. Can you guys, let's see.
Yep, there it is.
Can you guys see it now?
Let me put it on there. There we go.
All right, is it in, should be in, I'm trying to get it in presentation mode. Alrighty, let's see. All right, I think this should be, I'm gonna enter full screen. Okay, this should be better, I think. Sorry, give me 1 second.
No worries. No worries. Flexibility is important in medicine, right?
Trying to. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. Oh,
Okay,
is that
so I
it?
think this,
Yeah, that'll
can you
work.
see? It should be in full presentation mode. I'm not sure why. Let's see. I'm not sure why it's not showing the actual. Okay, it's okay. Let me just go back.
No worries.
Okay. Alrighty. So
That'll work. Yeah, that'll work.
This is the top 10 frequently asked pre-PA questions. As I said, my name is Rodalyn Joseph. I'm a physician assistant. So, and this is not in any particular order. It's just kind of questions that came off the top of my head and questions like, going through emails. So it's not like from most frequently asked to least. So it's just what I constantly hear. Okay, so one of the most frequently asked questions is the best way to get patient care experience. For a PA school, you need a certain amount of hands-on direct patient care hours. And this doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, or that if you don't have experience in any of these, that you're not going to get into PA school, or that it doesn't count as patient care experience. But patient care experience is basically hands-on experience where you're directly involved in the care team for that patient. So it can include being a CNA, medical assistant, patient care technician, EMT or paramedic, LPN or RN, a home health aide, EKG tech. And I put scribe because I actually really like scribes, but not a lot of schools recognize them as patient care hours. Well, certain schools don't. I'm not going to say not a lot. Some schools do, some schools don't, because you're not like directly involved. But I feel like you gain so much from being a scribe, and I think it's a great way to get experience. So if the school does, I would first check with the school that you're interested in. But if they do, then that's great, because I think it's like one of the best ways to get experience, especially preparing you for a PA school. And that doing notes. So yeah. All right, number 2. How many patient care hours are considered competitive? I would say at least, and this is just from speaking with different admissions people and schools, they typically want at least 2,000 hours. Of course, students tend to have more than that and may have a little bit less, but competitive is at least 2,000 hours of hands-on direct experience. This is not experience from shadowing or from indirect or from volunteer work, but this is what I spoke about in the first slide about directly involved in the patient care. And that's equivalent to 1 year of full-time work. So if you work 40 hours a week for 52 weeks, then that's a little over 2,000 hours. All right. How do I find a PA to shadow in COVID era? So of course we have the Premed and Pre-PA e-shadowing, which has been great, but a lot of students also want to shadow in person, especially to meet a PA to eventually get a letter of recommendation from. And I know it's really hard during COVID. Hospitals are not accepting students at this time. Hopefully it should get better as the world starts to open back up and more people are vaccinated. But for the meantime, I say to basically utilize your network, especially social media and pre-health clubs that you're involved with. Contact your friends. I'm sure you guys know other friends that are pre-med or pre-PA. You're probably in health clubs, pre-health clubs. Get involved with those. And as I said, social media. Go on Facebook groups. Post to Facebook groups. There's a ton of pre-PA and PA Facebook groups. Reach out to people on there. And then I personally like LinkedIn because back in the day when I was applying to PA school, this was in 2013, I literally had to go through the phone book. I utilize the phone book, called like every doctor's office in my area. I feel like I probably called 20 or 30 offices until like someone accepted me. And I feel like now in the world of social media, like LinkedIn and like Facebook is like the next best thing, or basically equivalent to the phone book, because and it allows you to basically better put yourself out there and get recognized, because you can create your profile, upload your resume, make it look super professional, to where they'll see your profile and be like, okay, yeah, we can take this person on. So of course, don't just randomly email or reach out to a bunch of people, but follow them, like their posts, get to, fill them out a little bit, and then send out like a warm introduction and see if they can take you. And I should say that, message as many people as you can, remain persistent, and don't give up. You'll be able to find somebody eventually to shadow and eventually get a letter of recommendation from. Alrighty. Number 4, how to decide PA versus NP versus MD. And this is for a lot of students that are like, kind of new to the PA field, or learning, trying to figure out if PA is for them, or if it's another track within the medical field. Especially, I hear NP versus MD, and that's all based on doing your research. But I think most importantly, it's also your personality, the type of life you want, your family, any family situations you may have, finances, student loans, if you don't want to incur a lot of debt, or if you don't want if you want to only be in school for a certain amount of time, or if you want to prefer to learn one way versus the other, or if you want more autonomy. All of this is basically your personality. And if you're in undergrad and you're not sure, you're like 19, 20 years old, don't bother yourself. Don't like stress out, because you'll figure it out. Like you'll do research, get involved with, like I said, hub clubs, and volunteer, and put yourself out there to be in the medical field more, so you can learn more about yourself and what you want and the type of provider that you want to be. So it'll definitely come to you, and whichever you choose, they're all great. All right. And I hear this all the time, especially during application season. So how do I write a compelling personal statement? Okay, so the personal statement, just as it says, is to get personal. So you want to be able to tell a really good story about yourself, your life, your accomplishments, any tribulations you went through, how and why you got to where you are today, why you deserve to be in PA, why you deserve to get into PA school, what you bring to the table. So the most important thing is to start with a strong introduction, captivate the reader. I always tell students, they read like thousands and thousands of essays. So how are you going to stand out? I'm so sorry about that. How are you going to stand out? And what are you going to, like, what about yourself are you going to highlight to, get that phone call to come in for an interview? So a strong introduction, a memorable conclusion, make them want to just pick up the phone and call you. So a good essay would include why you chose medicine, why you chose PA, what was that defining moment, and then things you did and learned, things you did and lessons you learned along the way, like shadowing experience, work experience, volunteer experience, how that made you a better person, how that better prepared you for PA school. And then, of course, always end it by reminding them that you are an asset, that you deserve to be in their program, that they're gonna, get an amazing person when you get that acceptance. So always have those key points in your essay. All right. And how do I ask for a letter of recommendation? Another frequent question, especially during application season. So a letter of recommendation, of course, they always want at least one from a PA. And of course, you'll typically get that from a PA that you shadow or connect with. And when you do that, of course, when you're shadowing a PA, highlight your skills, show off. It's okay to be a show off then, because you want them to remember you. You want them to want to write you a letter of recommendation. But this is just from, any person that writes the recommendation. You want to, of course, build that rapport with the person. And if it's, if you're going to apply a year from now, you want to most importantly remain in contact, because, you're going to end up reaching out to them a year later. So you don't want to just randomly email or message them asking for a letter of recommendation. You want them to remember you. So, periodically send them emails, keep in contact with them, see how they're doing, tell them how you're doing in your journey. And I think those 3 points are a great way to confidently get a letter of recommendation. All right. Getting in with a poor GPA. So most schools want at least a 3.0 GPA. Of course, they want you to have, better than that. I think a 3.5 is considered competitive, but they want at least 3.0. But it's okay if you don't have that. The most important thing to do is to recognize where where you went wrong with the classes that you didn't do so well in. Retake some of those classes. Sometimes it's always good to do a post-bac or master's program. And even if that doesn't technically raise your GPA up too high, that just still makes you a more competitive applicant, and that you went the extra mile, you got this extra experience, and have another degree or certificate under your belt. And of course, always highlight your other strengths, even though academics may not be your strongest, but you may have like years and years of patient care experience. Highlight that you're prepared to be in the medical field because you've been in the medical field. So use your weakness as strengths. All right. The best time to apply. The best time to apply, of course, is always going to be when you are ready. CASPA opens every April of every year, and the application process is basically a full year, basically like medical school. So you apply, and then you get an interview invite, and then you interview, and then you wait to get accepted. You get accepted, and you don't start PA school until the following year typically, but it's based on when that program starts, whether they start in the fall, summer, or spring. So if CASPA opens in April, the best time would be to apply. I typically say like the summer months, like May, June, July. I submitted my application August 31st. That's a little late, but August is still fine. But anything beyond August, I don't really recommend unless the school has a later start date, because I'm sure all of you know that a lot of schools do rolling admissions, which means that they do not wait until the deadline to start inviting and looking through applications, inviting people and looking through applications. They do it as they go. So as soon as CASPA opens, applications get submitted, they start looking through them, they start calling people for interview invites. So say you wait until like September or October to submit your application. By that time, I got accepted into PA school in October. So say they've already accepted like 15 people for 60 seats. By that time, they only have 45 seats left as compared to 60. So you're lowering your chances of getting in the later you apply. So apply early, make sure you're ready, make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. All right. Advice for reapplicants. Of course, a lot of students are reapplicants. It's okay to not get accepted the first, second, or third time. Keep trying, remain persistent, don't give up, as I always say. Go over your application, see where you went wrong, see your pitfalls. If you know that is your GPA, work on your GPA. If you know that you don't have a lot of patient care hours, work on that. A lot of times I meet students that say, they got an interview, but then they didn't get invited. So I always tell them, I think, it's not necessarily your academics, but it could have been your interview skills, because they liked you enough to invite you, but then like something might have gone wrong during the interview. So I always tell them to work on your interview skills, practice. And of course, if you can, reach out to the schools to kind of get some advice on how you can be a stronger applicant. A lot of schools may not write back, but yeah, just keep going over your application, keep practicing your interviews, and it's gonna happen. If it's meant to happen, it will happen. And finally, question 10, paying for PA school. PA school is not cheap. I had about, I came out with about $80,000 in debt. It was like $10,000 a semester, and it was like 8 semesters. So I had to take out loans, and I took out the minimum. I literally took out like $10,000 a semester. So you're gonna have to take out loans. I'm seeing like a lot more scholarships now. There's a lot more scholarships since there's, you know, the PA profession, of course, more popular and more in demand. And there's a lot of organizations now that support PAs and create scholarships for them. So there's more scholarships, as I said. So you can get scholarships, and there's grants. There's different programs where, you know, if you work for a certain amount of time in like an underserved area, like 2 years, and they pay off a certain amount of your loans. So, you know, you're going to have to take out loans. It's inevitable unless you got it just to pay for it, but you're gonna have to take out loans. Just be strategic. You know, start planning financially, especially if you have a family and other responsibilities, which we all do. So start planning ahead of time how you're gonna pay for school, especially how you plan to pay off your loans, or if you do plan to pay off your loans. So yeah, just get ready for the loans. It's coming. But there's more options, as I said, with scholarships and grants. So, and you'll find out more information, or you can find out more on AAPA and on, of course, social media. So yeah, let me just get back on top. As I said, my name is, let me click this. Okay, Rodlin Joseph. My social media, Rodlin Joseph _ and at Medsembly, MEDSEMBLY. So that's about it. So I'm gonna stop screen sharing.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure we'll have a few questions. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you as we continue this conversation. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to go into emergency medicine as your profession and within the context of being a PA. Hello?
I'm sorry. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, I hear you now. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. No worries. I was just wondering, tell us a little bit about why you went into emergency medicine.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's funny because when I decided to, well, when I was in PA school, or I've just always wanted to be an OBGYN before that. So when I got to PA school, I was like, okay, I'm going to be an OBGYN PA. But, and this is, like I said, all about learning about yourself. So during rotations, I found that like I hated OBGYN, not because like, you know, mother, baby, whatnot, but I actually didn't like any rotation where I just kind of saw the same things every day. I don't know, I'm someone that I like adventure, I like learning, I love learning, constantly learning, and that's why I like the ER. I like the fact that I see different things every day. You never know what you're gonna get. One day you'll see, you know, a bunch of cardiac cases or pulmonary. You never know what the complaint is going to be, and you never stop learning. So that's why I chose emergency medicine.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it is different every day, I'm sure.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
and this
and
this is one of the things that I think is a misconception of many students, is that they see most PAs, and maybe it is true that most PAs are primary care, you know, in primary care fields, but
right.
PAs can specialize in a variety of different things, and depending on what their interests are, what they like, what their lifestyle to be like. So I'm assuming that you work, you know, like 12-hour shifts for a certain number of days a week. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. And I like the flexibility of working in the ER because you work 10 to 12 hours a week. I mean, 10 to 12 hours a day. You only have to work like 12 to 14 shifts a month. So if you work, you know, some ERs like 100 hours a month is considered full time.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
some ERs is 144 hours. So you only work like 12 days a month or 14 days, and it's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, what area of the country are you in?
Well, I live in Atlanta, but right now I'm in New York. I'm practicing in New York I'm doing a COVID assignment, and I've been in New York for almost 6 months now. It ends in the end of the month, the end of June. So yeah, I'm in New York right now.
Oh, that's awesome. But you typically live and practice in Atlanta.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how has COVID affected your role as a PA? I'm assuming that there's been some alteration to what you typically would do in your work. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Yeah. So let me see. So in Georgia, I was doing emergency medicine and urgent care, and especially when COVID started, or probably in the summertime, it kind of basically became nothing but COVID patients. Like, we weren't seeing any other cases really, or complaints. Patients were just kind of coming in concerned for COVID, and it was a lot of COVID testing. So that's what like a lot of my work kind of became. And then and of course I always had that level of autonomy, and being that when COVID started, like, no one really knew anything about it. So we were basically learning as, the doctors and the attendings were learning, and we were able to work more cohesively to figure out, what is this disease? How are we going to treat it? How are we going to manage it with patients? So I was able to work closer with the doctors. That's one thing that changed. And even in New York, I noticed that too, being able to work closer with doctors on COVID cases, asking them questions, figuring out the care plan. And then the hospital I work at in New York, it specifically has the COVID area in the hospital strictly for stable COVID patients. So, and they typically have the PAs working in that area. The doctors don't really work in that area. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit about MedSembly. Tell us a little bit about your work there and what that's all about.
Yes. So MedSembly is a platform that I started or working on. It's a networking platform. I'm working on to basically bring together everybody in the medical profession under one platform, specifically create a more feasible way to connect students with healthcare professionals and have them, as I said, just under one platform, streamline that process. Like I said, one thing I noticed is that students have a hard time finding a shadow, finding a mentor, finding someone for a letter to write a letter of recommendation, someone to kind of guide them along the way. And that's what I really want to do with MedSembly, and just create a utopia, a medical utopia for everybody in the medical field. So it's not just PAs or doctors or nurses, but just everybody in medicine eventually.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Well. Best luck with that. That sounds like an amazing effort. Very good, very good. I want to encourage our listeners and those in the room to ask questions of our guests. If you have any questions you would like to ask, I know that we've had several people coming in and out of the room here recently, and so what is it that you think students should most concentrate on when they're in their undergraduate years? I know that often we get students who ask, do I really concentrate on shadowing? Do I really concentrate on doing well in school? Do I really concentrate on this, that, and the other thing? What are your thoughts about what's really worthy of their focal point?
Okay, so I would say that it really depends where you are in school. So if you're just if you're a freshman and just starting college, then of course focus on acclimating and getting your grades together, as compared to junior and senior year, where you're more comfortable and you don't have as much as a heavy load, especially senior year. I was probably basically a part-time student because I had all my credits my senior year. So you had more free time to do other things. So senior year would be the time that you want to, do more, shadowing and prepare yourself for PA school. Then you'll probably even have time to really start working and getting that patient care experience, whether it's being able to work part-time or full-time. So definitely the first half of your college years, really make sure your grades are on point. And then the latter half, when you're, more used to things and, getting everything ready for grad school, that's when, you can focus on, getting more volunteer work in and shadowing and working, doing outside work outside of academia.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. That sounds great. I know that often we talk about students who are non-traditional students and are maybe career changers coming back, going, maybe they were an accountant or an engineer or a teacher or something, and they decided to go to PA school. What is your advice for those students who are just trying to figure out, what do I do first? What should I do first in terms of trying to figure out how I go about this? Any advice for those kind of students?
Yes, of course. I actually have a few of them that are non-traditional. I had one student that she was a banker and then decided to go to PA school, but she actually always wanted to be in medicine, but kind of ended up in banking. And that typically happens. Life happens, different things kind of lead you to one career, and then, it's never too late to make a career change. But of course, I always tell people to do research, connect with someone that's in the field that can help you and give you great advice and mentor you. And of course, discuss that with your family, because being that they're non-traditional, they're not like, younger adults that I would say don't typically have as great as responsibilities as older people or people that already had careers. So have that discussion with your family. Mentally prepare yourself, prepare your kids, your spouse for what's to come. Make sure that you have a great support system, and research your support system, getting your family actively involved in your education and getting that support from your family.
Yeah, great. That's great. One last question I'd like to ask, and is what of the classes that you took as an undergrad in preparation, prerequisite courses, maybe even courses that you took that weren't required, but you took them anyway in preparation for PA school, were there any particular courses that you felt like were super helpful when you got to PA school that students should really consider taking?
Yeah, you said the prereqs, like the core science classes? Okay, yeah. One of the most important classes that I took was microbiome and biology. Those are, because you take, I don't know if it's still the case, but microbiome, biology, and anatomy, physiology, of course. I can't forget anatomy, physiology.
Right.
My first semester of PA school, I had to take anatomy, physiology. And I actually took it in high school, and I didn't really remember much of it. But if you can, try to take it in college, so it still sticks when you start PA school. But yeah, those classes, really taking them will really prepare you for those, for that in PA school, because it's very similar.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, any last parting words for us, encouragement, whatever you'd like to say to students that are watching now and that will watch on the recorded version? Any last words of encouragement for us?
Of course, as I always say, never stop trying, never stop, reaching for your goals, remain persistent, work hard, stay, have that grit, have that natural grit and eagerness to learn and do better, and you'll get there. Nothing is unattainable. You can attain and be whatever you want to be, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't either.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. It's a real pleasure. Enjoy your time in New York. And are you in New York City, actually?
I'm in Brooklyn. So yeah,
in
that's
Brooklyn.
Considered New York City. Yeah, I'm living in Brooklyn.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and be careful up there, and thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for joining us for National Pre-Med Day and for the PA track. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So National Pre-Med Day, we are close to our final wrap-up session. We'll be coming back here in about 10 minutes for the wrap-up, and we'll be joined by Dr. Ryan Gray, as you know, the extraordinary founder, CEO of MAPT, by his co-founder and the chief operating officer of MAPT, Rachel Grubbs, as well as myself. And we're looking forward to that. So we'll take about a 10-minute break and be back in 10 minutes for an important wrap-up session. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back momentarily.
Dr. Scott Wright,
Howdy-o.
how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How's it going?
It is going. We're still waiting on Rachel to wrap up her room.
Yep.
Let's talk. For all of you watching now, we'll do some giveaways here in a minute. But for all of you watching now, what did you learn today that you're going to take away and hopefully keep with you as you move forward through this journey? That's what I'm interested. Scott,
Absolutely.
what did you learn today?
What did I learn today?
Yeah.
I learned a lot about, I was particularly impressed with Dr. Davis this morning. And I actually wrote down his mantra, the 3 Ds: dedication, determination, discipline.
Yeah.
And I love that. Turning impossible into I'm possible.
Yep.
I love that. I mean, it's so motivating.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to get his books and read his books. And, I learned for my own life, I'm about to begin, and I'm putting this out there. I'm a little scared to put this out there, but I'm beginning a journey into personal fitness and weight loss. I don't have a whole lot I want to lose, but I've got some poundage I want to lose, and I want to get healthy. Yeah. And I'm connecting with that dedication, determination, and discipline in my own life. So I think it's applicable to everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you are in the process. Doesn't matter what you're going for, PA or MD or whatever. It doesn't matter what journey you're on. That mantra, that dedication, determination, discipline applies to you.
Yeah.
That's what I learned today. Yeah.
Rachel, what did you learn today?
I learned that I should be better prepared to share in Firefox. Man, I am not a friend with Firefox. I'm kidding. I'm going to share something more meaningful but that is true. So from a knowledge standpoint, I learned some very harrowing statistics with Sunny Nakai. I knew that we were really lacking having the right people in the room of med school. When you look at class bodies, you see the tiny, tiny numbers of people with color. But also, I think I thought a lot about intersectionality and a lot of different ways that might be represented. So yeah, we should be looking at whether or not our doctors look like America in terms of race and ethnicity, but we also have a long way to go in a lot of ways, right? About, people with disabilities and, just having a lot of different personality types and backgrounds, and just seeing how many people were heartened today by their representation reminded me how much more we need it. If we as pre-meds and med experts are feeling that, imagine how patients are feeling.
Yeah.
And, I knew a little bit of that already, but man, it got really brought home for me today.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Well, I'm excited to do some giveaways. I don't know exactly how that's happening. Rachel, maybe somebody knows.
Yeah, I think Leanne and Giovanni are doing the last of entering all of them into a random generator. So they might still need a minute or two. I think they're on the background. So we're definitely going to get that to you before 6:30.
Yeah.
So yeah, Giovanni will have the names in the chat here pretty quickly, I think. And then we can announce them.
I'm just thinking random generator. I feel like a random generator sometimes.
A random heat generator.
Yeah, I'm pretty random sometimes.
That happens.
I've got more bad jokes.
No, I got plenty of other stuff besides bad jokes. Let's talk about Mapped. For everyone watching, if you haven't joined Mapped yet, Mapped is our tech platform. Rachel, you did a demo of it earlier today. Mm-hmm. It's really, once you know your pre-med, if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, it's not really an application tool for like when you're applying right now. But if you are a pre-med student, you want to go to medical school, or you want to go to PA school, because we will soon allow pre-PA students to use Mapped. And by allow, I mean just the platform will work for you. You can enter your PA CAT and have PA schools in there to choose from. Go sign up for a free 2-week trial at mapped.com to really help you on your journey to medical school or PA school now. Gotta add that extra lingo in there.
Yep.
A bunch of people asked how they can work with myself or with Dr. Wright, or now even our new advisor, Verinia Granum. If you go to mapped.com/services, that's where you'll find our one-on-one stuff. Our mission here is to give you all of the information for free. Use that information as best you can. If you don't need us, great. That's perfect. We don't want you to have to work with us, but there are some of you out there who still want to work with us, and we do give you that opportunity as well. So I'm excited. Physician Associate School. Yes, the new Physician Associates. I'll tell you what I learned today. The biggest thing I learned today was that TMDSAS does have a processing delay when you submit the application. And so that was news to me.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, I thought because they don't verify the transcripts that it's available to the schools, but it still sounds like they're doing a whole processing of the application. There's still a delay before it goes out. So
yeah, there is, and it's usually not too long. Certainly not anything like AMCAS.
Yeah,
but a week or so perhaps.
Yeah, they hedged and said up to 4 weeks maybe. They got slammed last year like the other applications.
Yeah, they did. 20% increase, I think, last year.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what
this year
moves forward.
Yeah.
I want to take a moment to thank all of our speakers. Without them, obviously, we wouldn't be here. So taking the time to share their wisdom and their time to mentor all of you. Go follow them on social media. Go reach out to them if you can. And go check out our Amazon store where we have links to all of the books and other things that our speakers have written. So,
yeah, everything so books, whatnot, everything that is connected to the speaker is at nationalpremedday.com. So if you just go to the speaker section of National Pre-Med Day, anything we can link, so podcasts, organizations that are affiliated with what have you, is all there. And then there are also links to the things that they've written. So you can go to the Amazon store, National Pre-Med Day, if you want to buy their books. A lot of our speakers are published authors. So, and some of them I think are in the process of writing books. So maybe next year they'll have books
like
to sell.
Scott and Rachel.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was thinking like June Kim.
Oh, here we go.
Writing the book.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah. He credits you for the idea.
Nice.
Look at this.
Talk with him. Hey, surprise. So we'll have to figure out how to connect with these people. If you are on, say hello, shoot us an email at info@mapped.com. Sam M, I guess that's you. Info@mapped.com is the best way to grab that subscription. Would you say, Rachel?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you have this handle, email me at info@mapped.com. I'll put it in the banner and I'll also put it in the chat so that you can claim your prize.
Yeah. We'll email everyone too, just to make sure.
And I think this is just one phase. I think they've got a few and they hit the end of the characters. So yeah, if you see your name here on the screen, info@mapped.com is the way to claim. So I don't know who it was that threw up that chat with the winners. We got a couple people helping us in the back end, Giovanni or Leanne. You can throw it back up.
They're rocking and a rolling. Yes, behind the scenes, we had tons of help from our amazing team, Giovanni, Leanne. Thank you so much. There's the same one.
Okay, yeah, I think this is the same batch. So hopefully you guys can read it. There's a Sam someone, an Elizabeth someone, a Carolyn someone, a Life with Nina Davey, and a Chronically Carrie.
Yeah. I like that.
What if I already have a Mapped account? Yeah, we'll add a free year for you. Just make sure you email us because
Another
I'm
Map.
not going to remember. You can put all the winners into one comment and then post it. I see there's one at the ticker. Big fella Hubert.
Love it.
Nice.
Love it.
We'll post all these in the chat too, so you guys have them in writing. And obviously, once this is over, you'll have it on replay.
Yeah.
So
Rachel,
yeah,
what do you call a chicken who sees lettuce?
sandwich?
Who's looking at lettuce?
Oh, I don't know.
Chicken sees a salad.
Ah,
I ruined the question because I said his sees lettuce. Looks at lettuce. There we go.
Nice. That's awesome.
All right.
wow.
For all of you watching, what do you recommend for next year? What would make this better? Would love your thoughts either in the comments here or reaching out to us again at info@map.com. Prom asks, can I work with Dr. Gray one-on-one for the application? It is to be determined if I'm doing any application prep next year. Dr. Scott is available for one-on-one applications, as well as Verinia Granum, who has tremendous experience working with pre-med students. It's to be determined if I am. I'm available for one-on-one calls, but potentially not necessarily the whole application cycle. Have it on Saturday for people that work. Well, luckily 5/28 next year is on a Saturday. We don't know what we're doing that week.
Yeah, the idea is that it's 5/28, right? Because that number is easy to remember. Emily says doing National Pre-Med Day before AMCAS opens for submission. Yeah, point taken, although also part of what we're trying to do is help people join this event long before they apply. Because you're going to, hopefully if you're applying this month, next month, you got a lot of good info, but part of our mission is to pull forward when people get educated, because we find that oftentimes if someone has to reapply, it's because they just didn't understand what they needed. So yeah, I definitely hear you, Emily. But also, yeah, what I want to do is figure out how we can spread the word to people who are 3 and 4 years out from med school.
Yep.
So thoughts on that? How do we reach further out? Doesn't necessarily mean younger, right? Just people further out from med school.
Yep. Iffy asks, how much content is available through the free trial? I would prefer to time it when I can best utilize it. So that's the interesting thing with Mapped is the goal with Mapped is that you are using it from day one to acceptance, where you are tracking everything you're doing from courses to activities to MCAT, full-length exams, practice tests, or again, for our future pre-PA students or future PA students who are pre-PA now, you're tracking courses, activities, PA CATs, GREs, you're building your school lists, you are reflecting all of those things, you're gathering all of this data into one spot. In the future, you'll be able to, at least our goal is to be able to kind of replicate Interfolio so that you can keep all of your letters of recommendations in one place. There'll be a much more robust community inside of Mapped as well in the future. So really, it's not a use it for 2 months and you'll know everything you need to know. The goal is really to use it to track, and then something that we're still struggling at getting into Mapped, but is part of the plan, is all of the data that you're putting into Mapped. We can then use some algorithms to give you feedback based on your timeline to say, hey, you're 2 years out from applying. It doesn't look like you have any shadowing experience. Here's what you should be doing. Or, hey, you're applying this year. You don't have any clinical experience. Hold up, wait a minute. So the idea is that Mapped is really your go-to for everything.
Yeah.
And yes, you can invite your pre-health advisors to view your data as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. I think in terms of feedback, Vanessa was saying we should invite pre-health advisors so they can inform more students. We definitely did invite pre-health advisors to this event, but I think that, yeah, we could reach more of them. There were some here. I mean, I recognize some of them in the chat. But yeah, I think that's dead on, Vanessa. That's a great way to reach students.
Yep. Looks like they're working on the Blueprint winners.
Yeah.
I think we got all of our mapped winners.
Yeah, I think they got all posted in the comments. And then Giovanni and Leanne, maybe if you want to either make a slide to show at the end or just do a graphic and post it on social, just to make sure all the winners are captured in one place and nobody gets missed.
How much is a mapped subscription? It's $7.99 a month or $79 a year. So if you sign up for a year, you get 2 years or 2 months for free. Joe V's crossing his fingers for Blueprint. Drum roll, please. I don't think I have a drum roll button. I just have the cheer. Oh, there's the Blueprint winners.
All right. Naureen Sawar wins our course. The Blueprint 4-pack bundle is Healthy Fit Pre-Med.
Nice.
Congratulations, guys.
Awesome.
Congrats. Was there one other thing or no? It's just those two things.
And that was it. It was the 10 mapped and then the 2 blueprints.
Awesome. All right. Any last words of wisdom, Scott or Rachel?
Dedication, determination, discipline.
Oprah touched my leg. I fell in love. She did not. that was the best.
I mean, the whole moment, he was like, I went, I showed them my ticket. It said Oprah. They let me in. I went to TSA. It said Oprah. They let me right through. I mean, I was just like so tickled that whole minute.
Yeah, it was good.
We are talking about our keynote speaker, Dr. Samson Davis. Amazing keynote this morning. If you weren't here this morning, you can go watch it on replay now.
Yeah.
So go check it out.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate both of you for all of your hard work going into this day and every day for Mapped and for just continuing to spread the love of pre-med knowledge, which was my mission starting 9 years ago. Geez, I'm getting old. So for all of the hard work that you two are putting in, thank you.
Absolutely.
Behind the scenes, Leanne and Giovanni, thank you back there for everything you are doing.
My goodness.
Great day all around.
Yeah, there's a lot of hard work going on off camera, guys.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for everyone watching, again, if you have any feedback, suggestions for how to make National Pre-Med Day 2022 any better, please let us know. If you enjoy us, the three of us, plus Verinia in the near future, as a Mapped member, you get access to weekly Ask the Dean sessions, which take place very similar to this. And you come for an hour and ask questions. It's all Q&A. We do a live Q&A, Ask the Dean, every first Monday of the month. And so next week is actually, no, not next week.
June 7th. Yeah.
June 7th, because next Monday is the 31st. June 7th is our next public live Ask the Dean, which happens right here on our mapped.tv YouTube channel.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Awesome sauce.
I'm going to go eat
Sounds
some sushi.
good. Woo!
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Bye.
Bye, guys.